Hello and welcome to episode 128 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. It's just me for the intro. I thought I'd found the what I recorded over in the last episode, chat with Neil, and it turns out it wasn't that. It was another file, unfortunately. So I had grand ideas to bring that chat into here and re-edit it, but unfortunately I can't. So we're a little bit shy on this episode of what I wanted to do, because it's a bit late now to go back and record that with Neil. It's not easy to find a good time to record with everything going on at the moment. It can be a little bit awkward with me and Neil, but it's all fun. We'll get him back on at some point soon. Don't worry about that. So it's just going to be me and a little bit shorter on the intro. Before we go into too much more though, let's talk about Element Games. You may have noticed they had a break-in at their gaming centre and their shop, where their shop is based, should I say. As far as I'm aware, it's all fixed now, the door, and I don't know exactly what happened in terms of how far they got in or whether they got away with much stuff, but they're sending stock out, and I put my order in for the Corpse Grinder Gang and a few other little bits and pieces, and that's been sent out fairly quick turnaround, so hopefully that'll be with me on Saturday, because that's one brilliant thing about Element. It usually arrives that next day. I did quickly want to just jump into the support. The main support from Element is for people to use my affiliation code. And if anyone supports the show in any way, whether it's just telling someone else or using the affiliation code and anything in between, and Patreons, should I say, is probably the top of that. But anyone supports the show in any way, even just sending me an email saying thank you, or saying what they do or don't like, then thank you for doing that. It's wonderful. I know there are people out here who want to support the show financially, and one of the ways they can do that and choose to do that is by using, when they buy toys, using a method which doesn't cost them any more but kicks back a little bit towards me. And that's what the affiliation code does. And that's not to be confused with the Element Crystal code. So in the show notes and stuff, I've got my Element Crystal code, which is used in checkout. Every time you spend money at Element, you get crystals. Those crystals effectively are credit to be used. And at checkout, you can put in the code of someone you know, and you double up on the crystals you get, and they also get crystals as well. So every time you check out, you should be doing that. Whoever you're doing it with. I've got a friend, and I certainly use his every time. I hope he uses mine every time. That's, whatever. If he doesn't, that's cool. But I use his every time, and we both benefit from that, and that's cool. But the affiliation link, which is when I put the links up on Facebook or Twitter or in the show notes, the link you click, or by clicking on the banner on the advert on the website, those are the ones that support the show properly, should I say? Properly is the wrong word. They're the real support. That's the pathway that's set up in terms of the sponsorship from Element Games. So you click on the banner or the link, and then you purchase once you're in on that link, and that does two things. That gives me the kickback that Element Games give me, but it also lets them know that you've come via this show as well, which is an important part of the deal we have, kind of thing. It's not just about me trying to get money or anything like that. It's a venture for them as well, and they need to be seen, and I want to be seen to be sending people to Element, because I believe in what they do. I know that Saturday, when I come back in from work, there's a pretty good chance that my toys that come out on Saturday are going to be waiting for me, and it's pretty much going to be quicker than me going to the local GW to get them, or certainly quicker than me going to the local independent store and getting them. And if I wasn't at work, I wouldn't even have to leave the house; they would turn up. That's a big factor for me, and I like what Element do. Don't forget they've got their shop as well, and they've got their gaming centre. So if you are up in the northwest of England, there's lots of gaming going on there, and they cover everything as well. I hope the guys have all sorted out from the breaking, and as I say, they seem to be recovering from that, because no matter who it is, even if it wasn't Element, it's not cool to see. We don't like to see people within the industry struggling like that. So, I just wanted to get that out there. Element Games doing some really cool stuff. I am thinking that over the course, because we're now at once a month, that maybe we do talk a little bit about the hobby, and maybe as a little bit of a push, the hobby that I've been doing, or the guest has been doing as well, particularly on the intro, because, as I say, A, it's a bit of a push, B, people do seem to be interested, bless them, and it might not be just Heresy. So this isn't going to be turning into a multi-format show, but I might talk about what's on the painting desk and things like that within this. And I understand that won't be up to some people's tastes. I'm sure you'll be able to skip through bits if you don't like them, and that's fine. The show's going to change a little bit with the format as well, and it's probably going to take a few goes to settle down into that change. And obviously, this one's not quite where it wants to be because, as I say, I'm missing that piece with Neil, which is a shame, but it is what it is, and we'll push on. And hopefully, you'll enjoy the content we got. I think the stuff we've done with Darren is quite interesting, and Michael's always good value. So we're going to keep going. If you've got feedback about what you like, what you don't like, what you think we can be doing, please fire it at me. This is a great opportunity to play with the show and see what we can do. Obviously, there are restraints in that. We got a baby due in just over a month, so next show might have to be recorded a little bit early, just in case Baby Truth decides to show up a little bit early, and we'll be managing around that going on, which might be things like not having the door to the recording studio, in inverted commas, closed as much while I'm recording. So there might be a little bit more background noise, a little bit more atmosphere, we're going to call it. There's no way that I can tell my wife to keep a baby quiet just because I want to record a podcast and my house isn't big enough to hide from a wailing baby. So, that might happen. I completely understand if people don't like that kind of thing, but the nature of it will be that if that's the only time I've got to record, then I'll record. And I don't have a huge amount of time and resources to be able to get around that a lot, but hopefully we can manage it as well as we can. And as I say, with anything, you never know, it might even enhance the show. Magnus's little appearances might increase if he's trying to get away from the baby, that kind of thing. So on that front, the start of the year, I don't know how it's been for you guys, but for me, it's been pretty busy. We've had weeks where it's just been constantly getting stuff sorted, also getting things like bathroom done before baby arrives, and there's just bought 5 boxes home that apparently are a pram and a car seat and everything else. So I've got to build that and loads of little, all those life things. But I did manage to get 4 Assassins mainly painted, which is potentially 30k because I think, as I say, you've got the Mournival rules, I think, for Assassins, but there's no reason why you can't use the old 7th edition rules either. And hopefully in the future we'll be getting some official 30k rules as well. So I got one of each of those, so 4 of those. I actually did paint up 8. I went to a 40k tournament, doubles tournament with 10 Assassins, which was quite a lot of fun, if almost completely ineffective, but it attracted some attention with 10 Assassins on the table. So they're fairly much done. I've got to touch them up before they're fully done yet, and I think we might chuck them in the 30k box to use in the future. And then we've got a few things going on. We've got a Necromunda campaign starting at the club in a week, I think. So I've got some corpse grinders on the table, which I'll try and put some photos up, I think, probably on Instagram and Twitter. It's been good to have that campaign there because, as I say, with everything going on, it was easy to put off painting, and I suddenly thought, oh no, I need to get some stuff done. So I can't remember when it was, but 2 or 3 days ago, I was like, I've got to get in, got to do this stuff before I go to bed. Actually, there's a half-hour time slot there when I get in from work before Emma's home and we start thinking about food and stuff like that. I can paint for half an hour, and I didn't get a huge amount done. I'm quite a slow painter, and I'm easily distracted, which doesn't help. But I got some done. And that kind of helped me ease into a longer painting session on another day, partly because I've already started, but just kind of breaking that seal helps. But also there's progress being shown, and I think sometimes when you get in that painting rut, it's easy to forget how much of a motivational tool progress can be, because you can sit down and look at, I've got 10 unpainted models, they're undercoated black, and it's like, that's a lot of painting to do, where half an hour getting a lot of the base skin tones down, all of a sudden actually that skin's half done. So if I do another half hour and can finish those off, then that's all the skin work done. Little things like that can be a real bonus. In moving that forwards, I've got an event in February, going down to Attrition Gaming. March, if the baby's not too late, we'll be going up to Company of Legends, and then April I think is Attrition. I think that's doubles as well. So I need to look at all the rules packs and decide exactly what I'm taking, because I think I'm going to be taking my Custodes to a couple of those, my Talons, should I say. So I want to maybe bring some units I haven't taken before with those. So again, there's that element of pushing for an event. One thing I forgot to order at the minute, I just remembered, I need to repaint some of my Sisters of Silence. I want some colour shifting cloaks for their Void Sheen, or some purplish kind of funky colours for their Void Sheen cloaks. So yeah, it looks like I might be doing an Element Games order a little bit before April. We'll have to get some little bits and pieces, but I haven't had too much on the table. One thing I did get, which I haven't been doing any painting, was I bought some Aeronautica Imperialis with some Christmas money. And I'm doing Imperials. And my word, these models are amazing. So I've built 2 Marauder bombers. Destroyers. I've got 2 bombers left in the box. And they're cool. They were cool kits, the Marauders. Quite a lot of pieces. Very cool. Decent models to build. And then I built the Thunderbolts, and my word, these go together like it. These are one of the most fantastic kits I've put together in a long time. It just seemed to be, okay, start diagram 1, okay, diagram 2, and then all of a sudden you've finished. And it's like, it's I don't know, it's just so well designed. It's not like a real intricate kind of plan on it or anything like that. It's just well done all round. I literally just picked one up and noticed I missed a little bit off, which was still on the sprue, but there we go. I can finish that off. It won't take long at all. Absolutely fantastic. Aeronautica is, for those who have played the old game, it's nothing like that. I actually felt the old game really could slow down quite a lot when you were just trying to hit each other and having it's easy to fly past, it's easy to be on all the wrong altitudes, it's easy to be out of arc and all that. The new game is less it's less detailed in that respect, but it plays faster, it plays more fun. It's a little bit more abstract, but there's more going on as well, which I think overall when you're playing a game is the better option of the two, particularly as an older guy with less time to play. And it's something you can do. I get to our gaming club quite early, and one of the other guys comes with me. I give him a lift up there, and we can get a game of that in before people start turning up to play the whatever game we're playing that evening. We can get a bit of Aeronautica in first, and we're still learning the rules as well. So as it progresses, we're going to get much more, much quicker at that as well. It's a fantastic game. But while we're on the subject of that, because those planes can be used, and I've seen people been using them for Adeptus Titanicus, whether it's just to make something look cool or to be smashed up for scenery or what have you, or even for one of the stratagems, we had the Warhammer. The Warhammer community. They were at the Nuremberg Toy Fair, which I kind of didn't realise that they were at. And we had the Specialist Games reveals, because we had the LVO reveals at the LVO, and wow, we got a Heresy model in a GW seminar at an event, which is the first time. Some people were talking about expecting it. I had hoped, we talked on this show before, that if Forge World aren't doing the Weekender, if if we're not having that space for those previews. Yes, we've got Warhammer community articles, but they're also going to have to step their game up a little bit to bring them in line with the other game systems. And this was the first sign of that. We had Kunzar, the really cool, fairly divisive White Scars character. And it was a nice surprise, and leads me to believe that going forwards we're going to see the odd little bit of like that where it's appropriate. I don't think it's always going to be the extra little bit. It's not probably not, unless they release something like a box set, then maybe we do get front billing, but I wouldn't expect a huge amount of that. But it was really good to see that we're getting included in that, and it makes me more excited for more seminar reveals. The next big one will be Adepticon, late March 27th, 28th, somewhere like that. Will be on the Wednesday, so it's probably a little bit earlier than that. So yeah, really looking forward to see what they do there. Nuremberg Toy Fair, more towards the board game element of things. So Aeronautica, we got the what did we get? We got Valkyries and Lightnings, which look fantastic, and again that little bit smaller as well, so I think they would fit Adeptus Titanicus really well if you want flybys, or you say you want them for the stratagem, or if you want a few crashed ones. Absolutely fantastic. The Necromunda stuff is gorgeous, love it. And then we got multiple things for Adeptus Titanicus. We got a Warbringer, which it made the most sense to be the next Titan out, bearing in mind they make it in 28mm. It looks kind of cool. I mean, it looks like a Warbringer. They're keeping up with that kind of thing. Alongside that, we've got the announcement of an actual starter set. It's not a new starter set because they've never done a starter set really for Titanicus. They've done a rules set and everything else, but this is pretty much a 2-player starter set. 2 Reavers, 2 Warhounds, 2 Knight Lancers, the cards for each, the rule book, dice, stratagems, and all that. If that comes out at cheaper than you can buy them individually, then this is the starter set that maybe they should have led the game with. It's easy to say that now. I appreciate that. You're not getting terrain or whatever, but I think this is the key one, and it's it's not that far away really either. So it's really cool. And for those who just dipping in, maybe it's even a good way of expanding your own Legio just by yourself as well, potentially. Depends how much of the other stuff you've bought, I suppose. But we'll wait and see on exactly how much that's going to be when it's come down. And then we got Manufactorum Imperialis box of terrain as well that's coming, which is super cool. There's little containers and pipelines and stuff like that. Again, if it's plastic, which hopefully it might be, and they're just going to have a little check through. It doesn't say. If it's plastic, that would be cool, but we'll see. And then the big one, even bigger than the Warbringer, is we've got Shadow and Iron. So this is details of the Crusade of Iron following the betrayal at Calth, and all the cool stuff around that, which we knew was going to be the setting. So also known as the Shadow Crusade, that for the Legions. So that's probably where the Shadow bit comes in, the Shadow and Iron. And then on top of that, it contains rules for the Psi Titans of Ordo Sinister. So for those who don't know, these are warlord psychic titans that the Emperors kind of own and stay on Terra, and he sends the odd one out here and there. So I suspect they're going to be like the lone warhound, the lone warlord. I might have to buy another warlord just so I can have one set up as a Psi Titan. It could be real fun. But we got new night houses, new mana pools, narrative missions, and campaigns as well. So yeah, and they're going to preview that before they release it as well. So keep your eye on Warhammer Community. Lots of cool stuff coming out for Adeptus Titanicus, which is really good. And then Forge World this very morning, because I'm recording this the day before or the day it goes live, we've had the return of some transfer sheets, which is unexpected and awesome. Emperor's Children, Dark Angels, and White Scars. jump on them if you want them. I don't know if this means they've sorted out production of them and they've got better lines or what have you. But lots of people are after these things, so I'd be jumping on there as quick as possible, because even if they are staying around, it might be a case of they sell out, have to re-get them in, and sometimes we know that can take a while. So I'd be jumping on those if I were you and you were interested. What was interesting is some of the shoulder pads have kind of gone out of stock. Someone did say that they're kind of concentrating on the most popular or iconic marks for each legion and keeping them in. So I mean, they might come back in the future. It's one of those things, they could do a run of them if they decide they want to. But again, if you are looking at getting shoulder pads or any kind of specific marks of anything like that, maybe it's worth having a little consideration about how to, whether we want to get them now or risk them going on. I haven't heard anything about any other stuff kind of not being produced, and it might partly be a case of they're in the cycle to be reproduced as well, but that cycle's a long time. We know they're putting out a lot of good stuff, or a lot of stuff, period. So sometimes things might take a while to fit into the schedule for being moulded. And then moving on from the toys, we've had confirmation the Black Library the Black Library celebration is going down on the 29th of February. So we're going to get a little bit of information. We do talk about this with Michael. We're going to get the information from Warcom just beforehand. But be aware that if you want to get the Lion, the next Primarch novel in its limited edition format, that's when it's going to be released. On a more personal note, I booked my plane ticket to get to the Nova Open today. So it looks like I'm coming. I had to swap around all the dates and everything else to save a couple of £100. Turns out flying on a Wednesday is much better, obviously. So, I was a bit worried I wasn't going to be able to make it because of the cost of going over. Just the flights was going to start adding up. But I'm thinking I'm flying in on the Wednesday and then doing my touristy bit afterwards. So I need to... There's Magnus. Yeah, I need to work out what I'm going to be playing, but the event stuff, it's a long way off now. But I work travelling and flying, particularly bringing models over, can be a bit of a struggle. And I might want to play a different mix of games because I've got some friends over in the Age of Sigmar section. So, kind of excited though. Nova is going to happen this year. Anything I've still got a lot of stuff to sell to help raise the funds, and then anything left over, because it's going to be a short turnaround for Adepticon then. So I'm already thinking about Adepticon 2021, because you kind of have to sometimes. If you're planning these things, you need to budget for them. But I know I'm just going to be super jealous when everyone's at Adepticon this year, but that's the way it is. GW already hinting at their biggest kind of preview. As I said, I think I said previous episodes, like, they're getting excited about this one, so Adepticon should be really cool. Right, bearing in mind that was me chatting by myself, I think that's a proper ramble. So we'll cut that one here, and then we can go into talking with Darren just after the music. And I want to welcome back to the show. Long-term listeners might remember, or listeners certainly of the Age of Darkness will know of Mr. Darren. How are you doing, Darren?
Yeah, not too bad, Greg. How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you. We've just been chatting a little bit beforehand. I've just been smashed up at a 40k tournament, but it was a fun, friendly tournament, but we won't worry about that. But it's all good. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Heresy.
Let's not dwell on that then. Let's move on.
No, it's all fun. But yeah, we're here because this is a subject that I've been specifically asked about 2 or 3 times recently. The initial one was a few months ago, but I've had some emails sent with, very much saying people who may have been interested in Heresy for a while, who have never played, who are looking to get into it. But also, I've also noticed people at our club have started to talk about Heresy who never talked about it before. Mainly a new guy, but I don't think Heresy was on his radar. I've also seen some people on Twitter like picking up Heresy models where I don't think I've heard them talking about Heresy as a game. I heard them talking about it as a background, but not as a game. Certainly feels to me that there's a little bit of a not a resurgence, maybe, but there's it's just picking up a little bit. And this is all anecdotal. Obviously, this is the circles I'm in, the people I follow. But it just feels like there's a little bit more attention on it because of the nature of it being seen more via Warhammer Community.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Certainly amongst my gaming group, where one of my long-term gaming partners, which I've been trying to bug for years to get into Heresy, this last kind of 2 or 3 months has started to make the shift, and we're starting to talk about it, and we're going to play a few introductory games later this year, actually. And awesome. I think for him, what was a draw in was partly Warhammer Community talking about it a little bit more openly, but the Siege of Terror books.
Yep.
The fact that he actually did say outright to me, he said, rather than having to plough through a whole 54 books to catch up on where it was, he could start fresh with a brand new book series and feel that he was part of the scene.
Sure.
So I think that's an element to it. I think it's
a visibility thing as well, though, isn't it? Like it's an accessibility and a visibility thing of it. With the books, you see the books there, as you say, you can get into them. They're more, therefore, you're thinking about it. You're thinking it's cool. I'll get into it. And meanwhile, you're not just getting the Friday post of new Heresy thing every 2-3 weeks, but you're getting these Heresy things are coming. Here's a whole article, and people read the articles on Warhammer Community, even if they're not necessarily into that game sometimes.
Absolutely.
And it gets shared more then as well. And so it's this I've been saying that this had to happen, for a few years I've been saying that, and kind of a little bit kind of feel, I feel like, I was right, because it wouldn't necessarily cause this effect, but that was my belief, was that was part of what the problem was, and I think I was right in that, and that's not always the case.
You and I have talked about it at Open Days, haven't we? We've met up at Open Days. We've actually talked to both the Forge World team and the Warhammer Community team about it, about raising the awareness, and it looks like, not the nagging, but the constructive criticism we were levelling at them, it does seem to be starting to work. Let's kind of look at it positively. Does seem to be a bit of a ball rolling out there amongst the wider gaming community.
Yeah, there's a definite change of approach, and we're sitting here not long after, for the first time ever, a Games Workshop preview seminar, which is its own thing. When it's very easy to get confused between the different things, but a GW Games Workshop preview seminar, but when I say that, I mean a seminar at a big event, has had a Heresy model front and centre as a resin model, and that's not happened before.
No.
And all of a sudden, people are talking about how cool this Heresy model is, and this is in the middle of another article. So again, like, some people might skip past a Heresy article because they don't play Heresy. Well, all of a sudden, you're looking down this post, and all of a sudden, it pops up. So again, visibility is big. So, and fingers crossed we get a lot more of that. I think we're going to get the little nod here and there in those seminars. But the key is to capitalise on that as a community. And as I say, people have been asking how they get in, because from the outside looking in, it's very alien as well, and quite confusing when you go to a Forge World's website, trying to work out what you need to buy, how to do it, what an army is, all those other things. And
there's also a lot of misconceptions about it as well, isn't there? There's a lot of kind of outside community viewpoint of, it's just Marines versus Marines, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and very clear lines, like, of either you're all traitor or you're all loyalist.
Yep.
So
all of that stuff.
There's a lot of misconceptions which can be addressed.
Definitely. So the hope is that we're going to talk now about some ideas of, if you are getting into the game or considering getting into the game, then here are some things to consider, ways into it, what you might want to do, that kind of thing. Also, if you know people who are interested, you can maybe direct them to this episode, and there'll be, there's other places as well online that do various things, but I haven't seen many podcasts really talk about it the way kind of I wanted to talk about it. And then at the end of this, we're gonna look at how we as a community can encourage new players. Because I think that is the other major part of it is to actually be an encouragement and not be a deterrent.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And sometimes it's well meant and everything else, but sometimes we can deter people by action or inaction. So yes, all good. So I think the most important thing for me at the start is when someone's new, make it easy. Like when you're new to the game, don't put an expectation on yourself to go and have to drop £500 on a load of models and books and everything else, because otherwise you're not allowed to play.
Yeah, there's this classic thing amongst the community that I've run up against several times, and it always kind of makes me twitch a little bit when people say, "Yeah, so all of our games are around 2,500-3,000 points, fully painted." And you're like, you're sitting there going, "Well, I know when I first started Heresy back in the mists of time, I didn't have a 3,000 point fully painted army. I've had to build that up, and I'm still working on it now." So what's the expectation from someone brand new coming into the community? Straight away, that puts people off.
Yeah, and they might, and the big thing is they might not tell you that either. They'll just fade away. They'll just go, no thanks, I'm happy where I am. So yeah, there's a definite people put this expectation on themselves as well when they see it, and it's a natural expectation as well for some people to have that completed army before they start. When we look at what Age of Sigmar and 40k have done recently, particularly Age of Sigmar was a new game system that separated itself from Warhammer Fantasy, and its major factor was to take away having to spend X amount of money on a complicated system and have units of 50 of models and whatever, or perceive, because it's all perception at the end of the day, to need 50 models here and there to actually, you can play this game with 30 models and it is that game, crack on. And that was one of its fundamental reasons to change, was because that was so much more accessible than the old system. So let's not. And in fact, when I used to be a key timer at GW, and when I was in the shops for a long time beforehand, this is back in the early 2000s and whatever, when someone comes in and wants to play, and they're a youngster, particularly because a lot of them are youngsters, Games Workshop, you were trained to say, okay, well, get a lord, a hero, whatever, and a unit, bring them in, we'll play with that, and then next time you come in, bring a tank as well, or something else, or a monster, and we'll play with that, and you build up. Yeah, you learn the game, and you get into it. Because if you turn around again to them, their parents will go, I'm not spending all that before he's played a game.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's face it, within the Heresy Black Books, I know we're going slightly ahead of ourselves here, and we're kind of leaning slightly away from a new starter, but there are options in the Heresy Black Books for playing small-scale points games.
Yeah, definitely.
They are in there. Yes, you have to look a little bit. They're not glaringly obvious, but the community in a way has got itself locked into frontline gaming.
No.
Even Centurion gaming to some extent is locked into this, where you have to have 1,500 points aspect.
Yeah.
But there are elements within the Black Books of playing smaller scale games.
But even easier than all that is borrowing an army.
Absolutely. Or
counting an army as something else.
Yeah.
Those two things fundamentally, yes. Because sometimes, particularly with Heresy, you might be getting experienced gamers coming in who know how to play 40k or what have you, or War Machine or whatever it is, have a basic understanding of how war games work, so they can handle more models, and that's fine. That's cool. If there's a spare army around that can be used, then well, that's perfect, isn't it? If there's a spare painted army, there's not always a spare painted army. That's not an expectation I think we all have. But what you can do.
Let's be honest here. Most Heresy gamers have got at least two armies, haven't they? Let's be perfectly honest.
Or they've got an army big enough to make two armies out of.
Absolutely.
So again, later on we're going to talk about reaching out, but that's something you can do. Don't worry about it, mate. I'll bring down some dreadnoughts and a mix of stuff, and we'll crack on. And the other option is, well, a lot of people have got Space Marines. When someone's learning, when I go and play you, Darren, right, I want our game to be as representative of the lore maybe as we can be, and I know that most of the time I try and progress my painting, so I'm not putting down unpainted stuff. I'm not perfect at it. Some people are much more strict on that, and that's cool, that's great. But if that person goes, I want to try this game out, I don't really want to buy any models till I know I like it, but I've got a Space Marine army with some dreadnoughts and some tanks. Can I? Yeah, of course you can, dude.
And that's exactly what my mate is doing. My mate's got a 25-year plus Dark Angels army. And to entice them in, I'm saying, well, yeah, just use those. You've got your classic Marines. And that's part of the reason he's looking at Heresy. And this isn't a dig at the 40k community or the lore, because he's still collecting the Primaris stuff as well. But he's looking for now an alternative way to use his classic Marines, if you want to use that term. And he's like, well, can I use them in Heresy? It's like, yes, if it means we get a game, stick them on the table, because we still then get a game.
Absolutely. And if you are on that scale, if you are more towards the purist end, then it's not a problem telling people that. Well, yeah, cool, right? You're learning the game. I want you to play the game. Ideally, the way I play, I like to play really historical. So, I like my marks of armour to fit in or what have you. That's fine, but not putting not having that pressure on. So, from a new player point of view, it is tricky, but maybe to ask, look, I'm new. I don't want to spend a lot of money yet. Is there any way we could play this game, and then if I like it, I can go and start building up my army?
And I think that's what a lot of people have the attitude of. Let's face it, gamers are collectors.
Yeah.
Let's face it. If you get someone hooked into the Heresy, so let's say person Y has got a Ultramarines army, but it's all in like Mark 7 and Mark 8. They play a few games. Suddenly they realise they really enjoy the Heresy. They start reading more about the lore and the background, and then they start building up Mark 4, Mark 3 armours and start developing it from there. Their rhinos can still count. We'll come on to what you can use for kits later, I would imagine. But they may start changing some of their infantry. They will start adding new specialist 30k units in. But they don't need to do it straight away.
And because there isn't a Heresy tournament scene, because it's not tournament focused, it's more likely that approach is taken anyway. Where people want to get the thing out is because they're on a tournament treadmill, where you have to, because the game's the focus, the actual mechanical aspects of the game. Whereas Heresy, the mechanical aspects of the game might suit players, but they're generally not the focus for gamers. And I speak as someone who enjoys the mechanical aspects of the game quite a lot at times. I enjoy the challenge that provokes, but I still want to do it in the right way. And most of the people I know who like the rules also like to play like that as well. So yeah, that's one aspect. So you can borrow models, proxy models to start with. Also borrow the books. No one's expecting brand new person to try a game out and own everything before they do it and spend 50 odd quid, 60 quid. If you're, heavens forbid, you're playing, White Scars or something and spending, buying a black book and the other books. I don't think people are expecting you to do that either. So,
and to be honest, if you introduce a new person to the game, you're probably sitting down with them, constructing their army with them to begin with anyway, because the mechanism for constructing a Heresy army is now completely different to Age of Sigmar or 8th edition 40k.
Absolutely.
So, a lot of the people who come into 40k in the current edition, they would look at the Heresy setup for creating an army and then go, well, there's so many options here, isn't there? Well, where do I start? What do I do? What do you mean there's one force organisation chart? Well, why can't I pick all these different detachments? Yeah. So you'd probably be sitting down with them. Yeah, you may want to lend them your red books later, but the first few times is probably meeting up, chatting through the rules, how the rules work. And if they're I don't like the word veteran or more experienced, but if they've played the previous edition 40k, let's be honest, Age of Darkness first edition hasn't changed massively from 7.5, has it?
No, it's extremely recognisable. In fact, I still probably use a fair few of those rules accidentally every now and then, just because that's the nature of playing multiple editions of a system.
Game of memory.
Absolutely. But yeah, you're absolutely right in my opinion. So, in fact, we were going to do how to encourage, but we'll look at both sides as we go, I think, because that's the most natural way of doing it.
Yeah.
So from a new player point of view, I'm going to say, don't be afraid to reach out. Now, there's that very small chance that the bunch of people you're looking to game with are not nice people. It does happen every now and then, or you don't mix, or personalities clash, or whatever, and they kind of give you a brush off. It's such a small amount of times that happens. 99.9% of the time, it doesn't really happen, does it? People are welcoming because, well, frankly, you have to be. We're not all playing Call of Duty. We haven't got millions of people to lean back on. We have to encourage people into our hobby. If it does happen, and it really happens, if you're in an urban area, hopefully there's another group to go to. There's only so much you can kind of do here, but it should work almost all the time. And it's horrible for some people I know, don't get me wrong, to reach out to a new group of people and say, hello, I'm new, can I play? But the rewards are almost always worth it.
But I think kind of launching onto that as well, I think in general, and obviously there are always exceptions, we're talking about human beings here, so there's always exceptions for rules. The online community is generally really quite positive of new people coming in.
Yeah, except for the Space Wolves group on Facebook.
I said generally, I said most human beings. But,
and it's easy to forget. Online conversations are not real conversations. No. I've said it before on here. Someone, I think they did a science study, and essentially, online discussions are like most people are 2 drinks in. Right, where things start to get a little bit more loose with the way they're dealing with things. So even some of the most curmudgeon-y people that talk online, actually in real life, I've got a couple of people who sometimes I'm like, I just don't want to read what you've written on that forum because I know the way you phrase things and everything else. But in real life, fantastic people. I mean, of course, some of the stuff I write can come across, that way. So, but yeah.
It's the downside for written word, isn't it? That's the problem. You don't get tone, you don't get intonation, you don't get all that kind of nuance of speech.
Especially if you're a dry personality, anyway, like dry wit. It's bad enough in person. It's 10 times worse online. So reach out, make that thing. And on the other side of things, if you see someone who's paying an interest, reach out to them. Say, hey man, how would you like to come over and look? Would you like to do whatever? And when it comes to getting to that point, then playing with painted models, playing with cool models. If you know there's someone at the club who's interested, right? Kind of make an effort the next time you play, right? Yeah. Actually have a word with the person you're playing and go like, right, Fred here is on his tiltering on the edge of having a go. Bring down the best painted stuff you've got. Right, and we'll try and match our armies up as much as possible, and we'll make sure that we have some awesome combats, and we'll make sure we have, whatever, big explosions and things like that.
And I think the other thing to add on to that, it's not just about the actual armies, it's also about the scenery, the terrain you're fighting over as well. Yeah. Make it a real spectacle on the table, because that's the biggest way you get war games in. As soon as they see a good table, before they even see the armies, it drags people over to see what you're doing.
Yeah, big time. When all you can see is grey plastic, people walk past. They always have done, and they always will do, unless they already know what's going on. It just doesn't appeal, which is why events need to be fully painted. Even tournaments, in my opinion, have to be fully painted because you're selling the game. But yeah, cool. So we've kind of gone past that onto. We want to look at why 30k, basically. So if you are on the edge of thinking I might try it, or again, if you're showing it off and someone's expressing interest and says, why would I play 30k? I've got all this stuff in 40k. The historical theme it's kind of unique in that future history.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, out of all the Games Workshop games, none of the others seems to have, well, none of the current ones. We'll see what the old world is like in a couple of years when that starts emerging.
Yeah, but, I think that will. But yeah, you're right. None of them have that historical feel to them.
No.
And no other game system that I can think of, purely because of the weight of words that are behind 40k, and that's all it is. Because at the end of the day, it's still a futuristic sci-fi game, but it has that historical feel because 54 novels plus all the novellas plus Siege of Terrors coming out plus all the stuff from Lost of the Damned, all those out of print, well, not out of print, reprinted things, all the out of print stuff as well, all the history that's gone through that.
But also a load of stuff which is in the current codexes, which is being referred back to. If you look at the kind of the recent things like Faith and Fury, the Chaos Space Marine Codex, even the Chaos, the new Marine codexes, especially if they're first found in Chapter or first found in Legion, depending which language you want to use. It's all much more referring back to it. There's a tighter feel for the Heresy background now, and I think that is one of the big draws in, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like it's a real world history, even though it's made up toy soldiers.
Yeah,
and that is an aspect. If you look at historical gamers, it has a different feel to them. There is an element of that in the Heresy as well. So that is definitely a draw for people. Unfortunately, with that sometimes is that zealousness for historical detail. Yeah, they are there, but also it allows you to play with the building blocks of 40k. It allows you to go back and you killed Horus on this game. You stopped the Heresy. Like, how would 40k be different if you were the general there? You got that aspect of it that you can play into as well.
But it's also that kind of reliving those big moments, isn't it? It's Sanguinius of the Eternity Gate, or it's Isfahan 3 and the massacres at Isfahan 3, or Moloch with the night houses. It can be those massive major events. But I think what's also important is it can also be those small events, the ones that fit outside the storyline's white lines, the ones you may see in like a Black Label novella, for example.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Like, there's so many. The Alpha Legion. The Alpha Legion operatives get stopped on this planet, and or what have you, or the word bearers manage to incapacitate this part of the 13th Legion and stop them being able to meet up with the rest of them. It's, all those kind of little aspects which you can all build up because of the way the lore is written, and because it's so historical in nature, but it all feeds into each other.
I think another element of that, certainly for some of the people that I chat to, and we've talked about in the Age of Darkness podcast a few times, it's about having links to your 40k army in the 30k army as well. Some people really like that. They can see a progression on from one army to another and looking at how the two link. You can even, if you're playing like, for example, Chaos Space Marines, for example, you could even have the same characters carrying on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another aspect, having these iconic units and characters, being able to play with, as you say, not just with your Bjorn the Fell-Handed and your Lucius and your Khan the Betrayer, these legends in 30k. They're spoken of in 40k. They're spoken of in Hush Whisper. They're even myths because no one quite believes it. But in 30k, that was a captain. That was a dude. That was they did this. So you get to use that, and then on top of that, you get the Primarchs.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do you see on 40k forums, when's my Primarch arriving? It's like, well, if you play 30k, you can have him. Yeah,
real Primarchs play 30k. Yeah. We all know that. And it's not just the Primarchs either. It's Valdor, and it's those other people as well. It's you can actually play as some of the founding members of the Grey Knights. That kind of stuff. And at some point, you're going to be able to play as Malkador the Sigilite, and you're going to be able to play as the Emperor. So that all feeds in. Like that's super cool. You're playing with the key people, because even at 40k level, sometimes up until Guilliman was released, you could be Marnus Calgar and you could be Logan Grimnar. And Logan Grimnar, he was put in charge at the retconned 13th Great Crusade. He was put in charge of the Imperial forces, but there were people kind of not necessarily above him, but that could,
You were still playing with more local commanders, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. But in this, you're playing, Horus went out and conquered. Like, it was him leading that army that did it. That fleet.
Yeah.
And everything else. So, you've got these absolutely iconic characters, which, a lot of the time you see, particularly new players, the Primarch's on the table. It's in the list, first thing. I'm having my Primarch.
Yeah.
Because because they're freaking awesome, and they look some of the best models games we've ever produced. Ferrus Manus for me, I mean, God, Ferrus Manus is what, 5 years old, 6?
Well, I think he's closer to. Wasn't he the second prime?
He
was
might
the
have been the
prime
second,
wasn't he? So I think he's about 7 years.
God, and still for me, I think it's
He's still
hard
up
to.
there, isn't
It's
he?
hard to beat
The
him.
quality of sculpt hasn't disappeared in 7 years, has it?
No. But yeah, you've got all of them. You've got absolutely all of them. On top of that, you've got models you can't even use in 40k because they're lost. They're relics.
Yeah, or at least they're not as common.
Yeah, some aren't as common. Some are completely lost.
Yeah.
You've got all that.
Sicarans is a really good example of that, isn't it?
Yeah, and people, bless them. 40k players want them. You can't have them. And then all of that causes big death. The game system was written for like a 75% attrition rate, but not in a way actually that 40k and Age of Sigmar are now written. There's a different feel to it, isn't there? There's a lethality in 30k, which isn't about swarming your opponent generally, or
absolutely.
Or
you feel like you're going to get a game out of it.
Yeah, and that's not a criticism.
Briefly, didn't we? This isn't to criticise 40k and Age of Sigmar at all, but you do feel like the games in those two systems are much shorter, much more bloody, whereas 30k, it's equally bloody, but the game is more honed, I think, in some ways. And that's not necessarily a reflection of the rules themselves, but I think it's the way the armies play.
Yeah, there's... we were speaking previously because I was talking about 40k, and there's an urgency to 40k and to Age of Sigmar, which I believe is designed for a modern, almost computer gamer style approach to action. 30k doesn't have that. What 30k has is, well, this tank will blow away infantry. But that's cool because there's lots of infantry. That's fine. And this dreadnought will also, like, if you bring the wrong thing on in front of it, it will destroy it. There are big guns that do big damage, but not. You don't feel overwhelmed because someone's put one model or one unit on the table.
No.
Your one unit of World Eaters, whatever. The assault squad with Garland Serlac and all that, right? That by itself is scary, but won't dominate. It's when it's in a Spartan, and then it's got support from these units, and so you're building this lethality amongst these different things. But actually, when you break it down, you can handle those individual things. But
absolutely.
But you might lose a lot doing it, and that's fine. That's cool. Expect things to die. If you've got something in power armor in Heresy,
it's going to die.
There's almost every gun that's going to shoot at it has got a very good chance of killing it.
Yeah. And let's face it, those of us who play militia are even more used to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just bring a lot more.
Yeah, that's what you do, and it's definitely an appeal of the game is things like glaives and that, which can just cause mega damage, but also when they blow up, they blow up.
Yeah,
you're going to lose stuff then as well. So,
and I think that's something else kind of linked into that is also kind of the sandbox feel of the Heresy. They're all I'm going to use the word Imperial General in general here, but you've only got a limited number of armies to choose from. It's not like Age of Sigmar. It's not like 40k where there's a wide range of armies. There is a limited number of army lists, but within particularly the Marine army list, there's a lot of flexibility in there for people to fit a particular game in style. When you combine that with Legion rules, when you then add in Right to War as another layer, there's so much complexity to it.
Yeah, if you want it.
If you want it. And I think that's the important thing that you need to bring across to new players, which if we're going to bring this back on track slightly, you don't need to hit a new player with all of that straight away.
No, absolutely. Definitely easing in. I'm a strong believer in this as well. Yeah, that you use a more limited scope of things. It doesn't mean you can't have toys in there and fun in there, but you don't need to know the intricate details of how this combination of special rules works and all that stuff. Like you just need to at the start you need to experience the game and not even have an understanding of how each phase works without necessarily knowing the details of how those phases work. You need to have a feel for the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I think we should move on. We could probably chat, as anyone who listens knows. So we've kind of got reasons for and how to kind of look at starting. But if we look at the actual kind of what you need to do to start, rules is always one of the major things.
Yeah.
What do we need? Like, where do I start? What books do I buy? Is always a big one, isn't it?
Well, the easy answer there is that you need your army list as a starting point. And to be honest, for me, and I sometimes approach this from a slightly different angle, so you may have a different opinion on this. I like starting with an army list because then I know what models I want to start collecting first.
But even before that...
But you've got the rule book.
The rule book.
But
right.
You don't necessarily need to buy the Age of Darkness rule book straight away.
Absolutely. So you need the rules. Anyone who plays the game, you should be familiar enough to be able to play that game with the rules. Age of Darkness has its own rulebook that's sold by Forge World. It is extremely similar to the 7th edition 40k rulebook.
Yeah.
There are some small differences, notable differences, but small differences, that you can find out those differences online, various forum posts and things like that. A few psychic power changes. I try to remember what they are now, but there's a few little things. But in general, that 7th edition 40k rulebook will give you...
Will get you through. And you can pick those up stupidly cheaply now on various auction sites. Absolutely. Or even amongst your gaming group. You may find some members of your gaming group say, I'm never going to use this rulebook again. You can have it. Things
like how combat works, how shooting works, that kind of thing, armor penetration... All those aspects are pretty much how they're written in that book. So if you haven't got access to the Age of Darkness rulebook, because if someone's got the Age of Darkness rulebook, ask to borrow it and have a little look for it, and always read it, but don't worry too much until you start playing a game. Yeah, because they're abstract concepts essentially. And I think the other thing to point out is when you look at a rulebook, it's really thick. But the core rules themselves, there's not actually that many of them. When you sit down and go through it, and you actually then just pair off what are the basic rules that I need to know, there's not that many. The rule book is just full of all these extra special rules, mission rules, army organisation, psychic powers, equipment, all of those things. But the actual core rules is only about, 30 pages? Yeah, absolutely. And getting an understanding of how the rules work allows you to then progress. It's like getting that foundation in so you can go off and do the things which maybe break those rules and what have you. Age of Darkness rulebook or the 7th edition 40k rulebook. Those two will see you sound and allow you then to be able to play the game for which you then need an army book. So, there are different ways of choosing your army. And maybe this isn't the place to do it. I personally, I always think that you need to like the aesthetic of your army and the play style to a point. So there's a different balance for everyone within that. Some people approach it from just a model aesthetic, don't they? Some people do approach it from, I've always liked this army, so I'm going to play this army regardless of its flaws or its issues or anything around it. Some people do approach it from a rules perspective, which is fine. But I think generally within the community, generally speaking, it's because people have some sort of resonance with that army, isn't it? They pick a Marine Legion because they like either a character in that Legion or they like the way that Legion is written about in the novels, for example. Yeah, and those, they kind of have characteristics which stereotypes that can be played to. That the one thing Heresy does very well is it plays into those stereotypes, but is not restricted by those stereotypes. So it's important to remember that if you play White Scars, you can have an all-jet bike army and be that stereotype that everyone has for White Scars. But actually, White Scars are all about maneuverability, so they can be all shoved into rhinos like they used to be in 40k. But also, they actually are a legion of Space Marines, so they can have heavy weapon squads on foot and big, slow, pondering tanks and dreadnoughts and things like that. And that goes the same for almost every single army. There are things which are maybe less easy to do for certain lists, but they can all do some form of those. So you're not restricted by doing Death Guard. You aren't restricted to having an infantry-only army that plods along the board. You can have bikes in there.
Yeah, and I think that's something really important to get across to a new player is if you like a Legion, but you don't like or you are less keen on how that Legion traditionally plays, go for the way you want to play that Legion.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there will be one for companies or chapters or whichever kind of internal organisation that Legion has that will fight in that way because you have said my chapter or my company is fighting in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the beautiful thing about the Heresy is even the smallest Legion was 78,000 strong at the start of the Heresy. The big Legions, well, the Ultramarines were 200,000. Space was like 140,000. Realistically, if you put a 3,000 point army down on the table, you're going to have 100 maximum Marines. 140 for units with some of the armies that bring huge units.
Yeah,
it's you're talking about 1%. If you want to do that, it's cool, do it. How to choose an army? Well, that's always a tough one, as we said there. But there aren't. So we talked legions there. You've got.
But there's more than just legions, isn't there? There's militia. If you like Horde army, militia is your way forward. If you like a elite Horde army, Solar Auxilia. And then you have a Mechanicum, which are their own little ballpark all by themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, 3 different ways to build a Mechanicum, like super crazy, kind of individualistic. They don't play like anything else. You like super elite, you've got Talons of the Emperor. You can go Custodes, or you can have Sisters of Silence in there as well, which is pretty funky and cool. You've now got Demons of the Ruin Storm.
And that opens up a huge possibility there, especially when you point out to new players, so you don't have to be one of the 4 Chaos Powers. You can be whatever you want. Yeah, you can see so many little eyes light up. They go, oh, really?
Yeah, have we missed anything? Or are those the names? I think that's everything.
Knights are the only one we haven't mentioned.
And Knights do have issues.
A special place.
Yeah, they do. They are. They're one of those armies that can cause issues in that if you can deal with them, you can deal with them, and if you can't, you can't. They're in a funny place with the rules, and it's something that maybe is one of the ones where we say, if you're thinking about a Knights army, maybe talk to someone first, because it's not necessarily the wrong thing to have, but you might find it causes you problems after you've spent a lot of money down the line.
It requires preparation more, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Space Marines, we've got militia and cults, which can be built a myriad of ways. Demons can be built a myriad of ways. Solar Auxilia, Talons of the Emperor. Now, apart from Talons of the Emperor, because take them out, they are loyalists. You do not get non-loyalist Talons of the Emperor. Everything else, pretty much. You can play loyalist or traitor.
It's an either or, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, including demons.
Yeah.
Not all demons were working together in one goal. Again, when we're talking about there are 140,000 Space Wolves, right? You can't tell me that not 50 of them turn traitor.
Well, funnily enough, I was reading book 4 the other day, and there's a little side passage in there which actually does mention traitor Space Wolves.
Does it? Cool.
Yep. There is actually canonized information out there. So if you have these Space Wolf players go, no, non-Flood Legion turn traitor, you can just go, ha, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you have to work harder at your lore for some legions, like Imperial Fists. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Word bearers, maybe. Because, well, no, actually, no, you don't. Because, again, we look at the history of word bearers and they were really cleansed pre-heresy, but that doesn't mean they got everyone.
No.
Right? So, yeah, you can do that. I think word bearers, I don't think you can use their special rules so much. It would be more of a generic legion.
It would be more generic traits, wouldn't it? But then there are rules for generic traits, aren't there? So,
absolutely.
They are out there.
And your Thousand Sons, you might not have been at Prospero, So there's scope for having those armies as well. So you're not restricted in that, because that's another thing I see. And I almost hate the question, but I completely understand the question. I want to play a loyalist legion, and I'm like, cool. Well, you've got 18 to choose from.
Yeah.
And people are like, no, I've got... okay, right. Well, you can play loyalist, this, that. And there are some legions where that see it more than others. Iron warriors.
Iron Warriors, and Alpha Legion are the two classic, aren't they? Where no one really knows which side they're going to come down on.
Lots of people love the Iron Warriors loyalist character. But there's lots of cool stuff. There's lots of scope to do that as well. It's hard to pick a legion, to pick just one. But look at all those things. One thing that might help you is your legion-specific rights of war. So this is where you take a character with a special rule in your army, which is called...
Master of the Legion.
Master of the Legion, that's the one. And that allows you to take... they're called rights of war, and they give you positive benefits, and they give you some negatives. And they might change some of the units that you're allowed, or units that become compulsory troops choices. Because we're using this old system from 7th edition and previous 40k, you have to fill compulsory troops choices, to make your army legal. And then you're limited then on your optional troops choices and heavy support, and there are other slightly different versions of that, but essentially that's it. So a classic would be Pride of the Legion. Yep. Which means rather than your normal things that can take as troops in a Legion army, and we'll talk Legion because it's easier, are assault troops, tactical troops, recon? No. Recon. Yeah.
Tactical support.
Breaches. Yeah, but they don't usually count as compulsory.
I know breaches are compulsory.
Breaches, yeah. So there's 3 or 4 standard-ish units that you can take, and that's cool. Pride of the Legion adapts that so you can have Terminators and veterans. And this, one of the reasons it's used is because A, it's cool, because Terminators are cool and veterans are cool, but also because it can be cheaper if you've got access to the plastic stuff to fill your army out with more expensive units. So there's an actual dollar price, pound price, cheaper tag to do that. So that's part of the reason why.
I mean, Pride of the Legion has been the traditional new players starting right to war, hasn't it? Ever since book 1, it's been one that most new players go to straight away before they start developing their army further.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I say, within these, you'll get things like, as I say, the Raven Wing. Right, well, for Dark Angels, if you want bikes, then you can go that way, and it gives you special rules for your bikes and makes that really cool. On the other side of things, like Court of the Crimson King for Thousand Suns allows Magnus to be used to its full potential with Sekhmet Terminators. They might not be allowed fortifications or allies, so there are some restrictions on that as well, and it will change some little rules in there as well. And again, every Legion has their stereotypical one which fits into the way they play. And then every Legion has at least one other which is slightly skewed on that. So you can look at those. And then there are generic ones. So things like Armoured Breakthrough, which means your general is put into a tank. And Predators can be scoring units. Doesn't mean you can't have troops, but it means you can just take more tanks if you want.
Yeah. The other classic is Orbital Assault, which is a personal favourite of mine, which is your classic drop pod assault army, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So there's this whole host of different ways of playing armies, and some legions are better at some things than others. Your Blood Angels and your Night Lords are generally better at coming in from Deep Strike and having that drop assault kind of aspect to them. Sons of Horus to a point as well. And your Space Wolves might run across the board at you. With some big numbers, and your World Eaters might just put a load of dudes down with 1 million attacks each. So you'll get those kind of things.
But I think what we need to realise about the Right to War is they give you really fun rules aspects for when you're actually playing the game, but they also help with actually theming a model collection as well. Yeah,
absolutely. You can, when you're thinking of your army, you can have this viewpoint of how you want it to act. And then the Right of War can enhance that. So all of a sudden, say I want to do the Emperor's Children. What's the one where they all come on the side? I can't remember what it's called now. My mind's gone black. Maru. I can't remember what it's called now.
Marusaka?
Saka, something like that, yeah. Which is essentially they're keeping you busy at the front whilst you're hit in the flank by the force you never expected at the perfect time. That's an extremely Emperor's Children thing to do. And you can imagine your Praetor masterminding this plan to do this, and he's set up on this terrain specifically to do it, and that's how he's, and his enemy's always like that one step behind him and all that kind of, and you can play into that and set your army up.
Or you've got the classic Iron Warrior, Iron Fire, Right of War,
yes,
where you've got all these artillery pieces laying down fire for your advancing infantry. It's very First World War thematic. It's really popular amongst Iron Warriors players as well, isn't it? But it helps to focus on your model collection. So, I need some infantry squads and I need lots of artillery pieces. And then I've got, where can I go to my artillery pieces? I can then start looking at the models on the Games Workshop site or Forge World site and start selecting what I want to fit into my army.
Yeah, and as you progress from there, you can then expand out into other things. So you've got your rule book. You've decided what army book to take. If you're playing, now this is where it can get a bit complicated. If you're playing Mechanicum, you can go and buy the Mechanicum Red Book, as it's called, and it'll be under Army Books on Forge World, Mechanicum. If you're playing Militia, you can go and buy the Militia one. Was it Crusade Imperialis?
Yeah, Crusade Imperialis. So it has all the Imperial Army elements, doesn't it? Militia, Solar Auxilia, and the Knight Household lists.
Absolutely. And Mechanicum has, because it can link in with those as well, but it's got its own. And then you've got 2 Space Marine books, haven't you?
Yeah.
So you have the generic units one, basically. So whatever legion you play, you get that book, because that covers all your normal, in quotation marks, normal units that are available to everyone.
Yeah, and let's be honest, that has to be your priority book to buy.
If you're playing Space Marines, yes.
Yeah, if you're buying Space Marines, that has to be your priority book, because you can start building your army from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't even need your specific Legion one to be able to make an army list. You can do it from that. Now, if you're playing another Legion, you might have to look at where your rules are. If you're Space Wolves, Thousand Suns, White Scars, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, then your rules are in a black book or a black book to come.
Yeah.
If you're any others, you can get the actual Legions book, Red Book, which then has a section for each of the legions with their legion-specific units, rules, characters in.
Yeah.
So you're playing, what's your legion?
Sons of Horus.
Sons of Horus.
War Master Zane.
Sorted. So you getting into this rule book, the 2 Space Marine books, the 2 Astartes books.
Yeah.
Sorted. I'm a Space Wolves player. Bit more difficult. I want the rule book, the standard Space Marine book, which was it called again? Crusade Army List.
Yeah.
And then I want, for me, it'll be Inferno Book 7, which will have my rules in. So it becomes more expensive to do that until we get an updated, a new book or an updated book. You have to do it that way. So, as I say, the Thousand Suns and the Space Wolves are in Book 7. White Scars and Blood Angels are in Book 8. And then the Dark Angels to be released in Book 9. If you're looking beyond those 2, so we can do Space Marines now, we can do the Imperial Militia and everything else. If you want Demons of the Ruinstorm, you need Book 8. So again, a bit more outlay. Mm-hmm. And if you want Talons of the Emperor, well, technically you need Book 7 and 8.
And Book 8, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, there was a big revision to...
well, okay, we need to paraphrase that a little bit. If you're doing Custodes...
Yes, true.
Talons, you need both the books. If you just want to do Sisters, and you're a brave man if you just want to do Sisters, or brave person if you want to just do Sisters, you only need Book 7.
Yeah, and Sisters are quite restrictive, and that's why. But saying that, I mean, we're all adults. We know there are ways to get a hold of the updates, and of course, again, we're talking about like if your friend's got Book 8, like borrow it, because actually the changes aren't huge, but they are important. But it's a few points and a few bits of equipment and maybe the odd stat. It's not a huge amount, so you can do that. But those are the army books. So again, it's Militia, Solar Auxilia, Knights are in the Crusade Imperialis, Mechanicum are in their own book, and then the Astartes, the Crusade list, and then the Legions list for those. They don't cover everything. There are some stuff that aren't in books. There are updates. You can go to Forge World's website and go to the download section, and there will be there will be updates, but also on new units, like we've seen these new tanks being released, the Sabre and things like that. They have their data sheets on download. So newer stuff you can go and find that way as well. It's important to remember. So those are the books you're going to be looking at. While you're doing that, we've talked about that you don't necessarily have to go and play frontline Heresy, as it's called now, kind of in the scene unofficially. And frontline Heresy just means playing out the book to armies of 2,000 to 2,000 plus, really, isn't it?
It's for traditional army list, isn't it?
Absolutely, and decent sized armies, everything else. We talked about Centurion rules. Centurion is a rules concept that came out of Australia, and so like the original Centurion rules are fairly set, actually. The design principle behind it was partly to bring back the feel of second edition 40k. So no tanks, maybe a dread or two, the odd bike unit, but mainly infantry. There are variations in this. I personally have my own variation where I don't mind a rhino. Like, I don't mind if units have a rhino or two in their army. I don't think that's a major issue. And I maybe restricted some other bits a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But in essence, it's shrinking the points down.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that Book 8 has also got a Forge World version of Centurion in there as well, and part of the Chondak's campaign system. Yep,
absolutely. So there's plenty of options for finding out those kind of things. But you can find those online. So I need to collect my resources actually on my website. But if you Google Centurion rules, then you can find them. They're hosted. Was it Mournival group?
I think it is. Yeah. I think
so we'll try and put up links for that in the show notes. So there's different ways of playing that. There's also Zone Mortalis, which is, so if you've seen, iconically Zone Mortalis is the stuff that GW Forge World used to sell, that now they sell the plastic stuff for Necromunda called Zone Mortalis. It's close in fighting, whether it's on a ship or in a underground whatever, or a bunker, those kind of things. And again, uses a smaller points value. Changes the game slightly. There are slightly different rules. Some units become better and some units become worse because of the nature of where they are. But it doesn't mean there's you're not going to get tanks in it. You might get the odd dreadnought, but it's mainly around units of infantry. And the rules for that are free. You can download those from Forge World.
Yeah, they've just had a recent update as well, haven't they? So
there's another thing you can do there. And they will give you different ways of playing the game. One thing we forgot to mention with those, with the rule book, and I know in the Mechanicum book, it's got scenarios in the back of those books.
Yes.
So you get the rule book, you've got different scenarios. The black books come with their own scenarios as well.
But they tend to be very specific.
They do, to the
historical
campaign.
Refights, don't they? So they're not generic scenarios.
No, but some can be used that way. Yes. But also there is, we have different play styles in there as well. You have, my mind's gone, I'm really terrible memory today. But you've got the smaller mission sizes, what are they called? Where?
You've got Victory and Vengeance campaign.
So you've got Victory and Vengeance, which is going down to real small, isn't it?
Individual one, it's about 300 points.
Yeah, so that's can get a bit pokey, but can be played. Again, I think people have made new game systems based on that, which have tightened up some of that stuff. But you've got the Shadow Strike, that's what I was mentioning. The Shadow... Yeah,
you've got Shadow Wars.
Wars
you've got
missions.
Strategic Raids as well, which is designed for small point games.
Yep, so there are resources within those black books as well to play smaller points games as well. Not necessary, but might help, might mix things up as well. But when we talk about...
It can also really help for jaded, and I mean that in a positive way, because we have got limited... Yeah, refreshing would be a better way to put it. We have got limited number of missions, and sometimes playing games like Strategic Raids or City Fights can just revitalise because different units come into their own. But if you're a new player, you get a new player introduced, stick with the basic missions because it just brings across the game. You're actually just trying to get them enticed.
Yeah, definitely.
So keep it simple.
Absolutely. Fundamentally, what you need to play the game, like the minimum we're looking at. Again, I go back to that rule book and then your army books.
Yeah.
But there are other stuff out there, and the free stuff, go and get it. Like Centurion rules, Zone Mortalis rules, PDFs on Forge World, go and get them. Cool. If you've got access to those black books, there's some really cool stuff in there as well. And some of them muck around with stuff, so you might not want to try too much of it early on, but there is some cool stuff to do. I think we're pretty much there on rules. I don't think there's a huge amount beyond that.
Absolutely. So shall we move on to how you go about collecting an army then?
Yeah, go through it. What can you do? I mean, it's hugely expensive, isn't it, to collect Heresy? There is no easy way of doing it.
No, but you tell me a wargaming system that is cheap to collect.
Exactly. We're in a hobby that costs money. All hobbies cost money. There are many hobbies that are much more expensive than collecting these models. You don't have to buy everything all at once. Is always a good tactic. There are ways of making it more affordable, should we say. We always say, go to eBay, go to trading sites. You can pick up good deals in these places. There are some plastics that are allowed to be used.
And I think one of the things the community has got better at, we've still got room to grow, is actually making people aware of how many plastics are available out there for a starting Heresy player. It's very easy to just look at the Forge On kits and go, well, those are ones you need. But actually, when you look at the main GW range, there are kits in there that you can use as well. And if people say you can't, well, there's plenty of artwork within the black books actually that do use Mars pattern vehicles, and you just go, well, look, it's there.
That's cool.
How can you say I can't use it?
Well, yeah. Sometimes I say don't get in an argument. That's cool for you, my friend. I'm doing this. I know it's cool. Thank you very much. If they don't want to play you for it, then that's a different issue. But I'd be tempted to say, okay, that's cool. You do you. But yeah, you're right. I actually prefer plastic rhinos to Demios pattern rhinos. Maybe I'm a heathen. Maybe I'm not. Who cares?
Yeah, you are. But the Damus Rhino is far nicer looking, in my opinion. But I would never turn my nose up at someone using a Mars pattern Rhino.
You're a dirty traitor. So, the Betrayal at Kauth Dreadnought is not the prettiest Contemptor Dreadnought in the world, but if you can pick it up dirt cheap because people don't generally like them, it serves as a Dreadnought, and it can be repositioned. If you've got some modelling skills, you can reposition it quite easily. So, again, that's another one where you can pick up this something quite cheap.
You don't need to use a Contemptor. You can also use the old-fashioned box Dreadnoughts as well. They are accessible. They are in there.
Yeah, Castaphernum?
Castaferums,
yeah. See, there we go. It's a word you don't hear very often. And we've got plastic basic troops, haven't we? We got Terminators,
we've got Mark 3s, we've got Mark
4s. Yeah, and Terminators, Cataphracti, in plastic. And you can still find sometimes someone selling off their old bits from their Prospero box set or Betrayal at Kauth box set as well. So,
and let's be honest, you can also use Indomitor's pattern as well.
Yes,
absolutely. It is a valid Heresy era armour.
Yep. So, there's things you can do. And, I mean, there are people who take the time and effort, because there are two costs to what we're doing. There's the monetary cost, but the time cost as well. And some people are more money rich, and some people are more time rich, and some people struggle with both. And that's cool. Everyone's got their thing. But actually, there are lots of parts that can be used from 40k sets. There are Mark 6 armor out there which can be used, and I'm not going to get into what you can and can't be used, but there are bits of Mark 5 out there as well that can be used as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mark 5, by its very definition, is armour which is patched together and thrown together. It was known as Heresy armour because it was thrown together suits.
And this is what, back in the day before the Heresy was officially out from Forge World, there were Heresy groups that were they were spending ridiculous amount of money to buy 5 kits to get the various bits they needed to make 3 models, because that's what they can make out of those £180 that they spent on those 5 kits. Yeah. Because this part from this Sternguard vet was Mark IV, those kind of things. So there are bits and pieces out there as well. And there's also room for Artificer armor. So Artificer armor is power armor that's that bit nicer. So it can become a bit of a grey area for some people, but essentially, if you can fit the feel of a Heresy by dragging a piece, cool, crack on.
There is also precedent of Legion-specific armor, especially for the larger legions like Ultramarines, Wordbearers, Sons of Horus, for example. There is precedent that every legion had homegrown or home-produced power armor.
Definitely.
That broadly fit like Mark IV, Mark III, whatever, but wasn't mass-produced stuff. So there is scope. Chaos Space Marine kits, you start scrubbing off all the Chaos icons if you've got time to do such a thing like that. That is perfect Mark V in many ways.
Yeah, if you do have that time, if this is your main hobby and you can sit in front, you spend a lot of your evenings doing it. I've seen people do crazy scratch builds. The amount of time it takes sometimes to do that, and they haven't necessarily done it to save money. Sometimes they've done it because it's cost them just as much in other bits. But if that is an aspect of the hobby that you feel you can make up for, then crack on. Absolutely. So we got that's plastics covered. Well, actually, it's not, because there are other plastics. There are third-party companies out there that make extremely suitable parts, bits. Places like, and there's so many of them, but places like Anvil Miniatures, do some cracking stuff, particularly things like Bionics. Which you only get the odd one here and there from GW. Cybor or Skybor Miniatures do bits of it, but there's Puppets War, like name them. There's loads of them, shed loads of them.
Yeah. And if we talk, and that's what we've mainly just talked there about Legion forces.
Yes.
If you're doing, for example, Custodes, there are loads of plastics you can pillage from the main GW range from your Custodes models. And in some ways, I'm one of these. Like you being a heathen for preferring the Mars Pattern Rhino, I prefer the plastic Custodes jet bikes.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at demons, there's hosts of models that you can get from GW or anywhere else.
Yeah.
You might want to think about maybe not having them maybe obviously dedicated to a major power, or you may be really cool with that.
Or people, we've both seen pictures online of people doing Runestorm Demons and things like the Sylvaneth range, or Crypt Ghouls from lots of Age of Sigmar models.
Lots of the new Bone Reapers stuff. Could be amazing demons. There's huge scope for Necrons. If you could have a kind of a metal, kind of corrupted metal demon. That army, there's so much you can do. So definitely worth thinking about that. Obviously, if you're using third-party models, then Games Workshop aren't, technically you're not going to be able to play at a Games Workshop or a Warhammer World with them. That's something to bear in mind. If you are planning on going to a Warhammer World event, then your models, you don't take your McDonald's into the local restaurant and sit and eat it. So they're not going to expect you to bring in your immersion miniatures army and play it on a Games Workshop table. That's understandable. But there are lots of places to look.
And if you're doing something like Imperial Militia, once again, whole ranges of models you can use. Obviously, the classics are Vacadians. And we've now got good evidence that from the First Wall, that Vacadian pattern armour is standard Imperial armour for the Heresy period as well.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it for 10,000 years.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. But it opens up a whole load of other things, using the Skitarii plastics and using the Gene Stealer cult plastics. There's, once again, because the militia army is so varied, that means it gives you greater variety of plastics you can use. I've seen people using Second World War models from companies like Warlord Games, for example.
And on the other end of that scale, if you want to go and get all the resin bits for your army, then cool.
Yeah.
Go and get all the resin bits for your army. But you don't have to. Not everyone in your company needs to have all the extra paraphernalia that comes with your Legion. But if you want to do it, then that's up to you to do it. So
go for it. Absolutely.
There's so much scope in what you can do here. Obviously, we talked as we've gone through about army composition. Like your right to war will kind of dictate kind of what kind of units you might be looking at and everything like that, and that's fine. And Yeah, I don't think we need to talk much about that one, but colour schemes is an interesting one. People who are getting in.
Oh, are we opening that can of worms?
We talked about button counters earlier, and some people hold to this a great deal more than others.
Do we want to discuss Space Wolf Grey at this point?
Yeah, exactly. There are clearly identifiable classic colours associated with legions. Signature colours, shall we say. The Space Wolves grey for 30k being this dark storm grey, Ultramarines blue,
Imperial Fist yellow.
Absolutely. Some people, again, if they're approaching historically, will base all their armies. They have to see a colour plate or a description of a type of markings or whatever before they think it's viable to use in the Heresy. Cool, crack on. Do what you want. That's not a problem. Again, 140,000 Space Wolves, 200, the Ultramarines is the craziest. 200,000 plus Ultramarines. Yeah. Up until book 40 odd, if you painted a white and blue checkered pattern, not checkered, but quartered. That's the word. Quartered patterned Space Marine in Ultramarines. Ultramarine players who were like that would go, well, that's not a Heresy colour scheme. And then all of a sudden, on the Pharos, there we go.
Yeah, there it is.
Nova Marine's colour scheme was in the Heresy for this one chapter for these however many Marines that were in that chapter.
But then you've also got like the Imperial Fist Templars.
Yeah.
Who reverse the colour scheme so it's more black with a bits of yellow in there.
Yeah, the Custodes in black.
And purple.
And whatever. Like, every legion has, and things like Andy Hoare classically painting his Emperor's Children in that.
They've got his has got that very dark purple, but black vehicles.
Exactly. And actually, that historically, that was, talked about a lot. When you've got, now, it's going to jar for some people if you go wildly out of scheme, and you have to accept that some people might not be happy if you turn up with bright red Space Wolves. Maybe that's a little bit, who knows? But if you've got a story reason to have, say, I was considering having Space Wolves with a fair amount of red on them that represented, there's always the classic one of like the Crimson Fists kind of thing, that, the hero of whatever part of whatever legion it was, killed something with his bare hands and was covered up to his elbows in blood on both sides. So actually, they, in honour of him, they both hands up to their elbows are bright red or red. Yeah. You can do that kind of thing, and actually, there were 70. Even if there's 75,000 Marines in the Legion, there's a lot of.
There's still a lot of. The classic for me is if you look at a modern British army.
Yeah.
And you look at the amount of different headgear that the different regiments have across modern British army. Are you going to tell one of those regiments their headgear is wrong?
No, absolutely. And then as well, for all these people who want to be historically accurate with their Alpha Legion, if you lined up one model from every single person in the world's Alpha Legion next week, or Sons of Horus is another one.
I was going to mention Sons of Horus Green is the classic, because I've yet to see two armies the same.
They're all good. Even Ultramarines, they're all going to be different to a point. So it's one of those things to take into consideration. If you want an alternative colour scheme, think about it. I do think you need to think about it. You need to put that effort in to make sure that it's right for you. And you Hello Kitty Marines, you're probably going to have some issues. If you make Hello Kitty Marines, like, you have some issues if you play them in 40k, but in 30k, you might find you struggle to play a game. Quicker, so, but there is scope there. There is scope to deviate from the norm, if you wish.
But sometimes that may also help to theme your army. So we've talked that most legions have a stereotypical mode of war. But if you chose an army which fights in a different way to the normal legion, it may stand to reason that they have a different colour scheme. One of the ideas we've talked about on the Age of Darkness podcast quite a few times, and JP, who's one of my fellow co-hosts, I'm sure lots of people out there know of JP, have I spoken about are Ultramarines, which are linked to demon summoning, because Gilliman views it before he's fully aware of the kind of wider connotation as a potential use of war and having them in a completely different colour scheme. We were talking about having it reversed, so the shoulder plate is like black with or white with a blue omega, or various different colour schemes like that. So if you have a unusual colour scheme, possibly think about how it links to your army fighting in a non-stereotypical way.
Yeah, definitely. There's a huge amount of scope. I do think it's something that you need to think about. Because, the last thing you want to do is to make an army and then people go, I don't really want to play you. Yes. So there is that little bit of, just be a little bit sensible with it. But I think most people will be. And if you're fitting in the theme, you're going to be fine. Things like campaign markings were very common. Some Space Marines camouflage themselves. So all these things were not only kind of normal, they were almost expected. It was not. No one was shocked when that colour scheme for the whatever chapter they were of the Ultramarines have that quartered colour scheme. It was, people aren't shocked. Oh my God, you're deviating from the standard. Oh, it was accepted. So
one of the things I think to point out to maybe players that are more used to the 40k rules is there is no codex of status.
No, definitely.
There's no defined doctrine that says your tactical marine has to have this, your assault marine has to have this. There's a lot of commonality,
yes,
but nothing is fixed.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So yeah, and there's lots of places to look. So the black books have got lots of information, but also Google searching. Like you can find out some of that old stuff. There is stuff out there. There are crazy old posts with one line about something with a different colour. The Black Library books have information in them as well. So lots of places to look.
Yeah.
Playing. So this is the other thing. So it's all very well. Okay, I want to play. I know what Legion I'm going to pick. I know how I'm going to pick them, paint them. I know how to collect them and build them and everything else. But actually, where do I play? So this could be tricky, and this is very dependent on where you live and what the scene's like, and I appreciate that. It's going to be easier for some people than others. How do you go about finding players? I think one of the big things to do is ask at your local game group. If you've not seen anyone playing Heresy, doesn't necessarily mean they don't play Heresy. Maybe they play Heresy on another night somewhere else.
Yeah,
right. That's a big thing.
They have an army tucked away. For example, my gaming club is mostly historical.
Right.
That I spend most of my time playing historical games. But just a couple of guys were talking down there a couple of months ago, and they were talking about Heresy, and I kind of just stuck my head around the corner and went, "Oh yeah, I've got a Heresy army." And sometimes it just involves one person mentioning something, and people come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much of that going on. That's the first place. Or they might even know someone. Oh, I don't actually, but I know in another club next village along that he plays. The amount of times I've gone to an event and found someone who lives round the corner that plays the same game as me. Heresy less so, maybe, because it's slightly less popular than 40k and Age of Sigmar, but it happens. You can go on. There are player finders on Crusade and Heresy.
Yep.
You can tag yourself on there. You could put a shout out on the Facebook group, on Twitter, and tag people in, and maybe they'll retweet it. And forums, they'll have a space for where to play Heresy.
I was just going to do a shout out for a 30k forum there, because that's obviously an online forum, and there's people on there from all over the world. We've got Aussies on there, Americans, Canadians, lots of people across Europe. Put a shout out on there, and people will get in touch with you. Yeah,
it's a long shot, but again, I found people around the corner, or people have found. I've seen someone message who aren't very far away, so well worth doing. One of the good ways to get games in and to find people who play is to go to events, and I think some people feel they have to work up to an event. It's advisable if you know the rules. I'm not going to deny that, but I've had people at my events who've played a couple of games, and I've had them sometimes approach me and say, I've not played much. And I've gone, brilliant, that's fine. I know that Darren will help you in your first game. I won't put you up against, Fred over there, because he might not help you so much. But I know that these 5 people, if you're still not getting comfortable through the weekend, I've got 5 perfect games for you. That's fine. They will help you with the rules, and they will be happy to do it. So
yeah, I think that's the thing. The events going community is actually quite small, isn't it, really? Let's be honest. When you turn up to events, you tend to keep seeing the same faces, particularly in certain areas. If the event is being held in certain areas, it's often the same faces. And it, by knowing people, it does help to steer people towards people. And that's a personality thing, isn't it? Some people are just naturally more helpful than others. Some people just want to get on and play the game. I'm not saying that necessarily people just want to smash face.
It's also some people get different things out of it. Some people do want the challenge of the game, and they don't want to think, I don't want to beat this bloke up too much. Cool, fine, I'll find another opponent that's similar to you. It's all about doing it. Because it's not a tournament, there's less, the social contract's a bit looser. When you're going to an event like that, so you can have a much wider variety of people with different expectations. If I go as a casual player to a 40k event, then I'm compromising and I know it. Whereas if you're going to this, you might not know what you're getting into. But feel free to reach out, even before you buy a ticket, reach out to the event organizer. The chances are they're going to be used to this question. Don't worry about it. I've run a number of events and get this question quite a lot. I don't know if my army's going to be ready, and I don't know if this. And I'm like, okay, well, what have you got, and what can we do to help? I
think part of that is also read the event pack before you buy a ticket as well. If the event pack is out before the tickets are released, because that could help steer you. Is this kind of the event not?
Yeah.
Is not going to necessarily welcome a new player, because I think any event will welcome a new player.
But some will be obviously aimed at a more experienced player. There might be a lot of stuff going on that's non-standard. And that might overwhelm a new player. So, definitely think about it. And I tell you what, if you're near an event that's going on and you think, I'm not ready yet, or even my army's not going to be ready yet, or I'm not ready to play in an event yet, ask if you can go and watch. Because again, the chances are they're going to say yes. And by being around the game, if you're not playing a lot, but all of a sudden you've got a rule and you think you're playing it right, and you watch someone else and they do something completely different, and you're like, I've completely misunderstood how that works. Okay, cool. Right.
Which is easy to do.
Oh, all the time. Especially when you play more than one game system.
Yep. Or like we've mentioned earlier, if you played many editions of the same game.
Yeah, the amount of times I've tried to charge in the 40k style, and remember that it's the 30k style now, because I play different game systems. It's all part of the fun. But most events, are going to be happy. There might be the odd one where it's restrictive for good reason. But things like, if you're in the Midlands, come to Blood and Glory. We have got no problem with you walking around the Heresy tables and having a look and experiencing it. And I've done it, and people have come and have come back and then played. And that's what we want. And, most event organisers, by virtue of organising an event, they're predisposed to help in some way. So, you're not intruding. It's fine. It's all good. Where else online? Again, we talked about Facebook and forums, but Twitter and Instagram. If you're on these things, find the hashtags for Horus Heresy or whatever they are, whichever hashtags, warmongers, people doing heresy. Find the people who are doing it. Follow them. Join the Facebook groups. Join the forums, because the more you look at it, the more you will understand, the more will become clear. And you know what? I'm not going to say that being on Facebook or whatever is not going to have its points when you're like, why am I here? But most of the time it's good. And particularly with things like Twitter and Instagram, you can control who you're following. So if there are certain people in their heresy, like online community, that I just won't interact with, because we have different approaches to the game. Mm-hmm. And some of these people I talk to, I say face to face, and not a problem.
And I'm in the same position, and there are certain topics I just don't read. As soon as I see the heading, it's just like, I'm not going to go into that section or that forum or that thread, because I know I'm going to get wound up by it, and I don't need that.
And
so I'm going to walk away from it. I don't need to engage in it.
Yeah, and that's trial and error, and you're going to come across some stuff. Don't let things get you too down. Don't let things get you too high up on it. If you find people are, if you find that the negativity of something is getting you down, move away from that. Be aware of the kind of tells that thread might go into that, and avoid them again, because that's what I do.
Would you probably suggest recommending to go to more general forums and Facebook groups first, rather than go to specialist ones?
Yeah, Crusade and Heresy on Facebook is one of the best, fairly well moderated, and there's definitely a decent approach on that. The Imperial Truth and the Age of Darkness podcasts, and which other podcast ones am I on? Not a huge amount, to be fair. Not always for the reasons people might think, but just general reasons. Yeah, there's so much clutter in your feed as it is, and you see a lot of stuff reposted along different groups as well, which doesn't help. But if you post on the Imperial Truths Facebook post and something starts to rile up, the chances are we'll try and look at that and stop that from happening, because we might be accused of being fanboys and whatever, but it's more about having a place where people feel comfortable to come and share that stuff. And there's what I want is a positive initial kind of outlook, right? And people who kind of listen to bits of me say I'm a fanboy, and I will say everything's great. People who listen to the show properly will know that I will point out where I think GW or Forge World go wrong, or what's wrong here and there, and I will be on the positive end because I enjoy this.
I'd like to think that's what the approach we have on the Age of Darkness as well. Is constructive criticism, I think, is the best way to put it across.
Yeah, definitely. So if I see kind of more of a negative approach, then I won't necessarily step in, but I might just say, "Come on, let's let's rein it in." I definitely won't accept. Kind of that. We will get into more of that later, just in a second anyway. But yeah, come and Age of Darkness, there we go. And us, Crusade and Heresy is another good one. 30k forums is pretty good, actually, to be fair. As I said before, the Space Wolves, one of the Space Wolves specific Facebook groups, people on there can be quite quick to point out technical inconsistencies. Actually, I think you'll find that kind of approach is prevalent on one of them, and not necessarily tolerant. And I understand, like, sometimes there's a frustration from, we're moving to this, like, when we're dealing with new players, new people to the hobby, there can be a frustration when you've heard the same question 100 times. Yeah. As a new player, use the search functions. Right, that will save you a lot of hassle. Yeah, use the search functions. If you're like, how do I, Spartans? You got an issue with Spartans? Google, search Spartans, and you might find that answer there. If you can't find that answer, fair enough. But yeah, people get frustrated hearing that I'm collecting this army. Cool, that kind of thing. Or when's my Primarch coming out? Or those kind of things, because we hear them so often. That's all it is. I'm going to make it cool, because I'm not always the best at doing this. As an experienced person in the Heresy, when someone asks a question, try and assume that the question is genuine. Because it's easy to think, oh, here we go. But actually, they just don't know. And that's fine. And I think we need to be a little bit better as a community. A lot of communities need to be a little bit better to assume that person is being genuine.
Yeah, because they probably are. They normally are. People don't tend to post questions. I was going to say people don't tend to ask questions deliberately wind people up. Occasionally, some people do,
but most people aren't trolls.
No, they're not.
So, and if your reaction is, oh, here we go, just scroll past. The amount of times I'm tempted to write answers, and I'm just like, no, Greg, like, you don't know, so just scroll past. Because again, like, the amount of people I've seen join a group, not even post, but see an answer to a post, and then leave that group.
Yeah,
it's not good. So cool, and
then that creates a negative impression of the whole community.
Oh, big time. In fact, one of my friends went on to 30k forums, and there was someone on there who we were in a heated discussion, and they quoted me and put a snarky reply on it, and maybe I deserved it. I don't know. I can't. I don't think I did, but maybe I did. And it was in their signature, and that was the first thing he saw, and he just went, "Why am I going to be on a group with people like that?" And never came back. Just left. Because that was the first impression. First impressions are important. Perception is everything. So
absolutely,
as existing people in the community, we need to be more welcoming to new people in the community, and that is it. Answer those questions and encourage more. And not everyone can be open and helpful all the time. Some people are better than others as well.
Yeah.
Cool.
But that's also face to face as well.
Yeah. Big time.
And I think for me, the biggest bugbear, and we're kind of going down this rabbit hole now, so let's kind of develop this a little bit more. The biggest thing for me, and this is quite common and has been historically amongst the heresy community, is bashing other systems.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do it.
No.
Don't do it.
It doesn't do you any good.
It's just not worth it. If they're asking about your system, focus on your system. Talk about what's positive about your system. Talk about what you like about it. Talk about what you enjoy about it and what that brings to you. Don't do it as a compare and contrast in a negative way. So,
if you really enjoy Star Trek, this is the classic one, isn't it? You really enjoy Star Trek. You love Star Trek. You've watched Star Trek all your life, and you're like, I really want to get into Star Wars. And you're like, okay, I've got some questions about that film. You talk to someone, oh, you're a Trekkie. All right, Trek's awful. All right, why do you want to be part of that? I mean, it's terrible for this reason, this reason, this reason. They might not even know you're a Trekkie. You just walk along and it's like, oh, come play our game. Come enjoy Star Wars. I mean, some people will say enjoy Star Trek, but actually you'll find that this is terrible, this is terrible, this is terrible. Well, that person who likes Star Trek's like, well, actually, if I like these things and you think negative of that, then you must think negative of me. Because
it's human nature, isn't it?
Yeah, because why are you digging all the stuff? Why are you hating all the stuff that I like? There's no way you're going to want me as part of your group. I'll just go away.
Yeah,
that is the majority of things. Now, when you're talking, an obvious one is 40k to Heresy, and a lot of people, well, it's 40k is too simple. Blah 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 blah. Okay, scratch that. Why do you want to play Heresy? Okay, well, let me tell you. When you fire at the vehicles in Heresy, it matters where you are in relation to the front and the rear of the vehicle. So when you're fighting, like, you have this kind of, it's not realistic, but it's slightly more tactical maybe. Or it there are tactics and strategies around manoeuvring around a vehicle. When you're making your army list, you have these restrictions which actually help create a really themed army that that has weaknesses in these parts. When you're firing your guns, you feel like you're actually aiming because you're putting down a template. Right? Now, anyone who knows 40k knows that those are direct, comparisons to 40k. But I haven't actually digged out 40k for any reason, because you know what? Personally, and I'll say this personally, I don't mind wounding vehicles with bolt guns in 40k. It has a place and whatever. It's completely different, but that doesn't mean it's not okay. So yeah, just push forwards your thing. Do you know why do you want to play 30k? You can use Horus. You can use Lehman Russ.
Yeah.
Right? Pick out the stuff that you think that person, if you know that person at all as well, it's like, do you know that you can use a glaive? Right? And a glaive can do this, that, and that. And we've got custodies everywhere. And we've got, whatever you want to pick up on it.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's about bringing in talking up the game you play, but not by putting down other game systems.
Yeah, I think that we still need work as a community. To work on that. The fact that someone else might like, I sit here. I've played old 40k, new 40k, Heresy, Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy. I've played iterations of Blood Bowl, of Necromunda. Right, all those games have aspects I like.
They've all got aspects I don't like.
Absolutely, but as soon as you dig out aspects, I'm like, it just like there's just good things. There's good things. They're all decently well made games. Some are made better than others. I will say that, but they all do different things. And so, does it matter if you don't like that? Not really.
No.
So yeah, push your thing. I think that's a kind of a life thing. Push your thing. If you turn around to someone and you speak engagingly and excitingly about what's cool about your game, then you might actually convince people who are nearby listening who aren't even asking. Yeah. Because when you turn around, when you do stuff in game, you're like, oh my God, this happened, this happened, this happened. Actually, people sit up and pay attention and go, I want part of that. And that's a much more powerful
Nothing
feeling.
Attracts people like enthusiasm.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to be shouting and rolling dice or whatever. No. But when you're like, oh my God, look what happened there. Like, just some energy in your voice can do it. Like,
the classic for me is if you watch a game of Adeptus Titanicus when you get a meltdown engine kill. The reactions of the players always makes people's heads turn and look at what's going on.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that quietly.
No. In fact, so one of the things, one of the issues I had with Ninth Age when the community were making a game up to essentially carry on Warhammer Fantasy Battle for what they wanted to do. One of the issues I've always had with it is when you looked at the table, no one looked like they were having fun. Now, they were having fun, but they were concentrating so hard and everything was so meticulous with that game. But that's what they wanted. But at no point did you sit there and think they're really enjoying themselves. Yeah. And I honestly think that was a major part. Like there are lots of reasons, and they're up against titanic beasts in major companies. But in our club, we had a few people who played it, and then they all just stopped very quickly, and no one walked over there and said, "I want to play this," because they didn't look like they were having fun. and again, personalities, like I can be quite dour of face at times and whatever, and particularly if I'm tired or just not in the mood, then I'm not great with people. Some Matt Woodsmith as my co-host on Full Stride, he's one of those people who's like, he's always looking energetic and he's always keen to welcome people in. We're different. Humans are different. But I tell you what, when I'm having fun.
Well, it's kind of like Blood and Glory this year, wasn't it, on the Sunday? And I know we kind of talk about things you've talked about on Full Stride here, but when we had our 3-on-3 Titanicus game on the Sunday, the amount of people who just wandered over to see what was going on and then just stopped and watched.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just attracted people, doesn't it? And part of that is, like we mentioned earlier on in our conversation, an attractive table, attractive models, something which is also unique that you don't see in other game systems as well. Yeah,
and I also think the nature of it being less competitive and by competitive I mean antagonistic. Like against each other. Yeah, you were all competitive in those games. You all wanted to win, but there was you're playing that game together. Whereas and that can happen. Don't get me wrong, that can happen in Age of Sigmar. But they're playing a tournament and they want to win, and that's cool. Yeah. Actually, I think there have been big strides in both 40k and the Age of Sigmar community to make the game better focused in terms of experience on the table. I think that's improving.
More collaborative.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think is what it comes across as, isn't it?
And that has an effect. People notice that when you're on the table, and it helps because when you start approaching the game like that, you can take and some people are very good at this anyway, and some people have always done this, but you take more kind of out of the other person's success. Oh, you shot that! I can't believe you shot that. There's less riding on that win as well, which there's less pressure on that. If you go to a tournament and you want to do well, then pressure will affect the way you respond to things.
But it's also responded to things when people come across and ask you a question. I mean, how many times you've mentioned on Imperial Truth a few times, haven't you? Where 40k players have looked across a Heresy board and gone, "What's that vehicle?"
Yep.
And then just respond in that possible way rather than just, "Well, it's a Spartan, isn't it?" Say, "Oh yeah, no, it's a Spartan. It's basically an upscaled Land Raider. It does this."
Or, "Oh my God, they don't know what that vehicle is."
Yeah.
Like, which is another.
How can you not know what that is?
Yeah. Or it's resin, so I don't know if you'd want it. Like, negative experience that actually that one encounter puts that person off ever trying Heresy because he assumes everyone's like that. Whereas, "Oh yeah, mate, this is a Spartan assault vehicle, that you can get from Forge World. Actually, you can use it in your games. I don't know if it's any good in 40k or not. I don't think it is because I don't see any. But in Heresy, it allows me to deliver my Primarch right up into the guts of the enemy. Like, does it? Oh, cool. What Primarch are you using? Yeah, all of a sudden you've entered into a conversation there. You haven't shut anything off.
Yeah. Or rules changes. Like when Deep Strike is the classic example. 40k, you have to be 9 inches away unless there's a special rule that says otherwise. Heresy, you can be right on top of them. And they say, well, I didn't know you could Deep Strike that close or Deep Strike in that close. Yeah, of course you can, but there's a risk because if I go off the table or I land on the unit, this might happen.
Yeah, and the chances are I'm going to get shot to pieces.
Yeah, I'm standing around for a turn, looking down lines of bolters.
Yeah, that's it. But by responding in that way, you're opening up a discussion as opposed to cutting it off and denying that opportunity for people to get more involved. So, yeah, it's all good. What else have we got? I think we're pretty much there. I don't think there's a huge amount. If we just review it back, like smaller games.
Yeah.
Not too many weird rules at once. Like, use some of the fun stuff, but don't use some of the crazy stuff, maybe, or not too much of it at once.
Build slowly.
Yeah, build slowly, and build within kind of. Everyone's different, aren't they?
Yeah.
So build to your limits, and go with that. And when we're on the other side, be patient with that. Like, just because you're playing 1,000 points doesn't mean it's less fun. You can still make it fun, and as a bloke, if whoever it is comes and says, "Oh, Greg, I want to try out 30k," well, you know what? I'm not going to bring my toughest Mechanicum list to that game, right?
And I'm not going to bring 2 Thanatars on a 1,000-point list.
No, it's again, actually, whether it's good or not, I'm not going to bring the negative game experience.
No,
like I'm not going to bring quad mortars. Right, not because they're not good, but because I mean they've changed now. But the old ones, I just don't want to I don't want to spend 10 minutes laying down all these templates in front of someone whose first game it is. So I just won't take it, and I might make the less optimum decision because actually, I might say, you know what, Darren, really, what I should do here is back off and allow this unit to come in and shoot you because that means I'm going to be safe. But I want to show you how devastating a charge can be with a unit, or I want to show you whatever it is. So I'll make this charge in here, and we'll go that way. Like you're not there. The purpose of those early games is not to smash your opponent.
Or also helping them out, saying, well, if you do move into that position, then notice where I've got these 2 units, and this could happen. Are you sure you want to move into that place?
And that's the way to do it. Not you don't want to move there because you'll get shot. It's okay. I see what you're trying to do. I'm going to give you the option here because if you do that, like you're going to fall into this trap of here and here and here, and it might work for you because you might break through that trap. Like 70% of the time, you probably won't. So you can take the risk if you want, but what you might look at is doing this and giving those options.
It's that classic introducing new player by telling them how you would play that game. Yeah, it's about introducing them and letting them make informed decisions
without playing
based
the game
on what you've told them.
Yeah, so there's a balance to be had, and that's a skill that you get better at the more you do it as well. Because some people will go, no, thank you, I don't want any advice. And you know what? Sometimes you just have to go, cool, make your mistake. After the game, when they say, oh, well, this, we say, actually, when you did this, if you look at, you saw that you actually, you didn't do any damage in that combat. If you'd gone the other way, you would actually have been able to do this and kill half of that unit, hold there, and then counteract, bounce off that unit to another unit. So it's about doing it the right way. And it's about a new player being willing to take that as well. You don't want to be, and it is a balance because you don't want to be told how to play your game because you want to play it and learn.
Some of it depends on the experience of the person playing, doesn't it? Yeah, the new person playing. If they've played lots of multiple war games, they may say, just let me get on with it. If they're someone brand new to it,
just let me know.
Need more guidance.
There might be. Let me know the special rules, and that's one thing as well. Like if you're playing at the start, and you've got 100 million special rules because you're Mechanicum or whatever. Then you don't necessarily need to use them all. It's one of those things. But yeah, I think we've covered quite a lot there. We've been talking quite a long time.
We have, yeah.
Maybe people just wanted to know which books they wanted to buy, but that was in there. I think I might try and write those bits in the show notes as well. Yeah, I don't think we've missed anything really.
I don't think we have.
Okay.
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything someone would need to know there. I think we've been quite comprehensive.
Yeah, maybe a bit too comprehensive for the thing, but that is the nature of the show. We do like to ramble. So, wonderful. Thank you for coming on, Darren. Borrowed you, hired you from the Age of Darkness. So, a quick shout out if people don't listen. Age of Darkness podcast.
So Age of Darkness, we're on all the usual podcast platforms.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook, Age of Darkness as well. We're trying to get an episode out every couple of weeks. We're trying, but as you know, it's always a challenge recording.
I'm once a month now.
We're quite varied. Yeah. We don't just cover games. We also cover background lore. We're currently doing a Old Hammer warband competition from the old Lost of the Damned and Realms of Chaos books, which is got us quite excited about things.
Cool.
So have a listen.
Yeah, wonderful. Many thanks. We're going to head to the music and we'll say goodbye.
See you later.
Well, joining once again, we have Mr. Michael, Mr. Trek of Words. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. We haven't had you on since before Christmas, so we were going to have a little discussion of the Advent audios for Heresy and some other little bits that are going on as well.
Yeah, so three Horus Heresy audio dramas this year. Last year.
All audios was quite interesting. I kind of didn't even think about it until I downloaded them. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It was just a thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, not everyone is into the audio format, but I think these days it's a given. I think you just have to accept that BL are keen on pushing that. I personally like them. If you don't, I mean, I guess it's a shame, but it sort of is what it is now.
Yeah, definitely. And there are people out there who really do like them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's all cool. We got some interesting stories as well. We'll start off with the first one was Illyrium. What were your first thoughts on it?
I really rather enjoyed it. So it's Darius's second Horus Heresy story because, and I forget where it was. He's written a Gulliman short story in an anthology somewhere. So maybe it was in Scions of the Emperor, the second of the event-only anthologies.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember where it is. So this is the second one again featuring Gulliman, and I thought they're not linked narratively, but sort of maybe a bit thematically, just digging into Gulliman's backstory. And I rather like that sort of thing that doesn't have a huge bearing on the rest of the series, but just drills down and gives a different viewpoint to what we've had before. And I think this was, it's basically just two characters having a conversation for 25 minutes. And so if you like that sort of thing, if you like something that's really dialogue heavy, it's great. It's fun to have that sort of conversation, but I appreciate it maybe won't appeal to those who are into the more action-oriented 40k heresy sort of stuff.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think any of these three stories will too much. It is an interesting story. I quite enjoyed that slightly. It's that third-person view of Gulliman that we haven't had that much. I don't think we've had a few remarks from other Primarchs and things, but not an actual review of him, like growing up, like from a real human viewpoint. I'm trying to think if we've. No.
I think you might be right. I don't think there's been a huge amount of other people talking about Gulliman when he's not present. Because this is not, he's in the story, but he's not voiced in the story. He's not a viewpoint character. It's his, I think she's his Chamberlain, Tarashi Uton, who's the sort of mother figure, really.
Yeah.
And one of the Ultramarine sergeants, Sergeant Ammon, not a name that I'm really familiar with from other stories, and it's the two of them are effectively trapped on the Macrag's Honor while it's under attack, and she thinks she's going to die during the course of this, and he's trying to keep her talking, to keep her mind off things, and so she revisits a moment from Guilliman's youth. And you're absolutely right. It's other people reflecting on him, and she's essentially sort of trying to teach a lesson to the Ultramarine sergeant that I guess Guilliman wants his sons to be more than they are on the surface, as a reflection of him.
Yeah, it's and it's all encompassed within that story, as you say. It has a slightly different feel, I think, as well, and maybe that's just a different voice in Darius. I think that maybe helps that we haven't seen him write a huge amount of Heresy, so it comes from a slightly different place. There is one issue in that the placing of this story in the timeline is a little bit skewiff, potentially. Like some people were trying to work it out.
Yeah. I think that's right. If you are super keen to make sure that everything neatly lines up in your head, I'm not sure this does. I'm not 100% sure it's really been thought through, which you can take either way, however important that is to you, because it's set on Macrag's Honor. It's under attack by traitor Space Marines, so. Yeah, I don't know when it's supposed to be set.
There's not a lot of timescale for that setting, and it's something that would easily have been solved with the change of name of the ship. It's frustrating for little things like that. It doesn't bother me too much. It's not in a mainline story, which helps, but it's just a little niggle.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, it didn't really cross my mind. I just thought, oh, okay. It's obviously set pre or post, but it's not, as you say, it's not part of the mainline series. I think if it was in a novel, there's a legitimate call for continuity really needs to be ironclad. In something like this, I get that it's a niggle, I get it's a bit annoying, but ultimately, I don't think it matters too much.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And people are going to sit on different parts of that scale, and that's cool. But let's just hope that, as you say, with the Siege novels, particularly as we push forwards, we've already had the issue of, it's kind of a little bit can be explained, but Vulcan being welcomed to Terra, but also then Dawn being surprised that Vulcan's there. But there are reasons that that Dawn could be pretending to be surprised. So, there is a little bit of grey area in that. In this one, it's a little bit harder to explain away. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I think it told the story well enough in that it's one of those. It approached that kind of familiar story we've had of it really made the Primarchs seem alien and scary, which hasn't happened for a while, I don't think, in the stories. But it did it in a way that wasn't just retreading the same ground that we've read before.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's by virtue of it being, it's essentially a parable as much as it is a direct story. And it's a not only a female viewpoint, which we still don't get that much of it in Black Library, but it's the viewpoint of, to all extents and purposes, Guilliman's mother, not biologically, but she's effectively his mother figure, looking on him, talking about the way herself and Connor, his adopted father, were genuinely scared of him and thought that they might have a problem with him in his youth. So yeah, that's a nice viewpoint that I'm not sure we've really had anything like that sort of from a Primarch's adopted parent's perspective. Certainly not thinking of them, like a loyalist Primarch, someone who we think of as noble and good and all this sort of stuff, having the potential to not be. So yeah, it works. It works very well. It's short. It's to the point. It's quite characterful. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it will be for people like you and I and other fans who like the little bits of extra texture. and aren't too concerned about how it fits in with the bigger picture because it just builds on the sort of backstory.
Yeah, and if we move that on to revelation of the word, there's a little bit more in there that does feed into the main the main 40k timeline. We've got Lorgar. Basically, one of his people comes to him, and they found the Lectitio Divinitatus being widespread in the Imperium, and basically the whole story is Lorgar kind of having to deal with that. The reason he was chucked out of the Imperium is now becoming more widespread.
Yeah, I think it's a delicious moment of irony that I've certainly been wondering if it was going to be covered during the Heresy, because this is set during the Shadow Crusade, so it's sort of around the point of betrayal or thereabouts. And yeah, it's the moment that Lorgar realizes his great work, which he's sort of abandoned, has been taken up by the Imperium. So it's wonderfully ironic, and it's just nice to see it a little bit. You know, it's not a novel, it's not a long story, so you don't get to see too much sort of behind his eyes of how he thinks about this. But you get to see a little moment of his response to that. I think we shouldn't go into too much detail of how he responds.
Well, but I mean, just by virtue of that, you have the nature that, hold on, what I was censured for or what, part of the reason I was censured is now becoming commonplace. But also, obviously, he's changed his allegiances now. So he has to look back on this and it's like, well, they're now doing the thing I was doing, but I've moved on. And it's that weird kind of relationship then to have between those two things, which causes some delicious kind of issues for him.
Absolutely. And I think I said in my review, this isn't going to change anyone's opinion of Lorgar really from what they've seen elsewhere. But I would argue that in fact it reinforces it. There's this idea that Lorgar is at his heart a little bit petulant.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think anywhere near as much as some fans are sort of slightly dismissively tarring him with that brush. But he is at least a little bit petulant, and his response to this sort of emphasizes that you're absolutely right. He's moved on. He doesn't. If this had happened 100 years previously, he'd have been overjoyed. Now he's not in that frame of mind. But he's not the sort of character to live and let live. No. He's not the sort of person to just go typical. He's he doesn't have a huge amount of respect for the mortals. Taking up what used to be his views.
Yeah, and as I say, I think there's a certain amount of listening to it and reveling in Lorgar's kind of anguish that he feels, which is really cool. But it was a really good, as I say, the thing is, it resonates through 40k. So this is a story where it does have that little bit more to do with what's going on. Not quite as much potentially as Morningstar that we'll talk about, but it's there.
Yeah, I think the only other thing to say on this one is it is like Morningstar will be. It's a story with a Primarch being voiced, unlike Illyrium. And I always think it must be tricky casting someone and then being the actor portraying a Primarch. But I think John Banks did a really good job with Lorgar. Really sort of built that charisma. Lorgar might not like him, understandably, but he is still a Primarch. He's a very charismatic sort of character, but he's really venomous. And I think that really came across nicely.
Yeah, and you say that. In Morningstar we do have, we have Magnus talking to Aramant, and the voices in that were really interesting in that sometimes, because I was doing some other bits, and I was like, was that, like, that voice seems maybe, every now and then seemed like it was on the wrong character. But
that's interesting.
I completely understand why they did it. So Space Marines have got a voice in Heresy audios. We know how Space Marines talk. It would be extremely hard for actors to go deeper and bigger than that without it being all Brian Blessed all the time. So, so they have to go a different way, and they do, and it works, and it's fine. Magnus talks, it's a bit more melodious than the, it's just almost more normal speech. But it has maybe a melody, maybe that's not quite right, but it has something where it's like, yeah, okay, cool, I can buy that. So they have to move around it a different way. But every now and then I was like, why is Harriman's voice like more stronger and deeper and more powerful than Magnus is?
I think that's a really good point, and I think you hit the nail on the head with Magnus's voice. So it's Sean Connolly playing Magnus in Morning Star, and he's done a few BL audio dramas, not that many, but he does have that sense of melody, that melodious voice. It is a bit more beautiful than Richard Reed's Ahriman, which is very traditionally Space Marine. So I think you're right. It can be a little bit of that cognitive dissonance if you expect that, Primarch is bigger, it's his bigger presence, he's physically bigger. Why doesn't he have the deeper voice? But I think you're probably right that it's the default of Space Marines, and you have to do something different to make a Primarch not just sound like another Space Marine.
Yeah, I also think potentially when you start to think about it that way, it adds to a more kind of not ethereal, but certainly otherworldly or alien feel to them talking. It's like, yeah, actually, why couldn't Magnus sound soft and like that and properly like that? Because actually probably could. I mean, Magnus could. Of any of them, Magnus could.
Exactly.
But even then, the others, you can imagine Lorgar, when he really wants to turn it on, could have that complete control of his voice. But it is quite alien to have when you think about these, Primarchs who are 9 foot tall with, huge like chest like cavities and the ability that they could also drop it down 4 octaves and roar at you kind of thing, if they wanted to. But yeah, so Morning Star is a story. All links back to. I won't go into it too much because it's all about a reveal, but it links back to the Primarchs novel for Magnus, and it's very it's interesting in that there's an element of trust between him and his legion, which is it's part of the story of Magnus, isn't it? Really, how much information should be given, how much should be not given, and how much should be willfully taken back.
I think that's exactly right. So it's a story about father and son, and of all the legions, Ahriman and Magnus, there feels like there's the closest. Maybe I'm not right with this, but it feels to me that there's a really close relationship between the two of them, and not just that sense of love that the sons have for their fathers, but a real trust and a respect. And so yeah, there's secrets here, and there's conversations around, like as you say, how much should be revealed, and once revealed, can things be taken back, or can the relationship still be the same? And it's interesting. It's very like the other two. They're very dialogue driven. It's low key, but you're right. This is the closest tie-in with the rest of the Heresy, not just because it ties in with the. What's it called? Magnus the Red Master of Prospero. Yeah. But because it's actually set basically at the same time as the Siege of Terror is taking place, and I think this is gonna link in to a certain extent with what's going to happen next from the arcs of Ahriman and Magnus. If
it doesn't, this story is wasted. There's a very definite line to them. Like, when you watch Godzilla and right at the end they have that little, there's an egg there and it's cracking open. Spoilers for the Godzilla that's 18 years old or whatever it is. There's a line here at the end which, like, if they don't follow through with that, then like you've got to ask yourself, why did they even bother? So there's hopefully that direct impact on what's coming. You talked about the Magnus and Ahriman being close, and I think it's the Primarch and the Space Marine out of all the legions where they are the most alike in terms of all their fallibilities, and we saw that through 1,000 Suns, like the whole time. Araman is doomed to make all the same mistakes that Magnus made because he still thinks he's better than his father, which is what Magnus's problem is. So Araman will always be telling Magnus's story again. And so when you've got two characters who are so much like that, then they have that affinity, but also every story that happens between them is a reflection.
Yeah.
And we see it every time, almost every time Magnus reveals something or explains something, you're like, that's exactly why your father did this or didn't do this or whatever. And it's just that whole time, and I think it shines really well as that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's testament to Graham having a good handle on these characters. So of the three audios in Advent, so Illyrian was one of Darius's first heresy stories. Revelation of the Word is David Allendale, and as far as I'm aware, he's not written much, if any, Lorgar before. But Graham's obviously written, as you say, A Thousand Suns and the Magnus Primarch novel and other bits and pieces, short stories and audio dramas. So he definitely has a good handle on the characters. And I guess that was reflected in not just the link with the other stories, but, as you say, a really good reflection of that father-son bond and how, exactly as you say, it's sons repeating the mistakes of the father. Yeah,
and as you say that, actually, it's interesting that you have, as you say, Darius brings that new look to the Ultramarines because he has a new writing style we're not used to, and different approach and different opinions, probably. David's story, again, was new to Lorgar, but familiar for David, so we're getting that... and then you get into Crimson, you get into Morningstar, and the story was very much a continuation because Graham is continuing that story. So Morningstar, you're not going to see that revelatory view of Magnus in Morningstar because Graham's written most of Magnus through this thing, so it's a continuation of that character. Whereas, I say, the other two are a different viewpoint and voice of a character we have seen before.
Definitely, and that I would suggest that Graham aside, that's a fairly clear reflection of what the Primarchs series as a whole, because these are all Horus Heresy Primarchs branded audio dramas, these three, and that series as a whole is generally tried, with some exceptions, like Graham writing Magnus or Chris writing the Khan. Largely, it's been new voices writing about characters that they haven't tackled elsewhere in the series, or they haven't been involved in the series up to this point. So I think it's a nice continuation of that. And sure, I really enjoyed Morningstar. I like the continuation of Graham's arc, but it's just always interesting to get another person's viewpoint. Like you say, Darius, may well just see the character. I'm sure he's trying to write things which are informed by what's been before, but he may just have a different opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, as we move forward, particularly, it's great to see those different opinions, different viewpoints. I wonder how, because you and I are very, we're comfortable with the unreliable narrator. We're comfortable with seeing one event from multiple viewpoints and what that can change. And we're comfortable with, that all those kind of aspects. Where some people are less comfortable with those. So I do wonder how those people feel with this, because in theory, if we move forwards with Heresy setting stories post Siege of Terror, and they go back and fill in bits and pieces, there's going to be more. It's only going to expand because there's going to be more authors writing those. I don't think that, you're not going to expect just to be Chris and John and whoever. There'll be other people writing them, and hopefully there will, in my opinion. But that will lead to more viewpoints, more theories, more different styles.
I think that's absolutely right. I know I'm generalising here, but I would largely say that the sort of reader who wants a single joined-up, consistent viewpoint and depiction is probably the type of reader who wants to get to the end as quickly as possible, who wants to know the facts rather than the grey little bits of texture.
Sure.
So I'm sure there's a crossover, but I suspect at least some of those fans just aren't really interested in a story which goes off over there and just looks back in a sort of low-key conversational way.
Yeah, you're probably right. Except for that, that one or two people who read everything and still don't know what they want from it anyway. But there are some people that just are never pleased, so you can't even worry about them. But yeah, you're probably right on that front.
Also, the Black Library as a publisher and the authors specifically, you can't try and please everyone, because then you're going to end up with a diluted story. You're not going to do one job well, never mind both or all. So I think it's an inevitability, and hopefully, listening to us or reading reviews and that sort of thing, people will pick up on where there is that bit of ambiguity. And if they think, well, that's not really what I'm after, then at least they'll go into it. If they choose to read or listen to them, at least they'll go into it with open eyes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think those overall those three stories were really good. I didn't really know what to expect. I think I expected one or two more stories. Realistically, we're coming towards the end of. They're not going to touch the siege too much, I wouldn't have thought, in this kind of thing. So, how much do they want to invest in that? They've got plenty of other stuff going on.
Yeah. I think part of me was slightly surprised that there were only 3 Heresy stories. But there's so much to talk about now. And there are other settings, Blackstone Fortress and Necromunda and those sort of things, combined with the fact that the siege is happening, and the siege is obviously big news and requiring a lot of work. I'm not that surprised that there was only these. Perhaps a little surprised there weren't any prose stories for the Heresy.
Yeah.
But then it all comes back to what are they going to do with them once the main siege series is finished? So there was always the conversation in the past of we will put everything out in every format. There'll always be the shorts and the audios will be included in anthologies. And is that still going to happen? Is there going to be a Primarch's anthology or more Primarch's anthologies? Will there be a Siege of Terror anthology? Yeah. I don't know. It could be that they're just thinking, let's just get over the finish line and then we'll do more of this sort of thing later.
Yeah, I think they were pretty much said that's numbered Heresy or mainline Heresy stuff. So when we look at the fact that the Honoured and the Unburdened wasn't including in that, so it didn't get that regular release. Primarch's is something else. But yeah, who knows? Just who knows, frankly.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
I would be very surprised if these 3 stories don't get a CD or a bundled up MP3 release. Was it 2 years ago that there was 3 Heresy audios from Robbie McNiven, Ian St. Martin and Laurie Golding?
Yeah.
I think it was 2 years ago. They got bundled up as a Heresy disc, a single audio drama with 3 stories in them. So I think that'll definitely happen. From a monetary perspective, I would be very surprised if all the extra little stories, and there've been a few Primarch's ones, the odd Siege one, I'd be surprised if they don't get bundled up into anthologies at some point.
Yeah.
But maybe just not for a while.
It's a way to make money, isn't it? They're a company out to make money. So
yeah, and that's not a negative. That's just what it is. You don't have to buy it if you don't want it. But a lot of people don't like buying things in digital format. They want to have something that they can hold. And I think that's perfectly legitimate in a world where you can order something on iTunes and Apple or Amazon could, in theory, just say, nope, we're taking that away now. I understand people wanting the permanence.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, cool. I mean, we can move this talk on to other things that Black Library are doing. We've had the release of Sons of the Selenar, which is the limited edition novella, soon to come out, at some point to come out in regular edition. £40. No kind of knowledge of its release beyond we knew it was coming. It riled up a few people, as is wont to do. £40 is not cheap, is it?
It's not. And this is the first time in the Heresy, Primarch's excluded, that I've gone, nope, I can't justify it. I can't afford it at the moment. And even if I could afford it, I can't justify £40 for novella, bearing in mind that, for example, The Wolf King which was released as a £30 novella, which was still really expensive, was eventually then released as a £3 paperback novella.
Yeah.
I mean, the question of value for this is out in the window now. It's how much are you prepared to pay?
Yep.
And £40 was too much for me personally. However, I think this is what it is. It's up to us.
Yeah.
As fans to choose if we're going to buy it or not. It did sell out. It didn't sell out as quickly as most of the other recent Heresy titles have. But hey, it sold out. As far as Black Library are concerned, I think they're going to call that a success.
Yeah, absolutely. We went a bit funny there, but the gist of what you were saying certainly came through, so that's fine. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know people were worried that about speed of sale, because in the build-up there was worry because Siege of Terror Book 3 was hard to get a hold of, but and the website was struggling. But then they also released limited edition game stuff on that time as well. I had utter confidence that there wouldn't be those issues because there was no limited edition gaming stuff, but also it's a novella and less people buy the novellas.
Yeah.
It's a simple fact, and I think a lot of people really didn't expect that to happen, but that's happened all the time. And again, the amount of people who missed out, a handful that I've seen trying to get the book online. I think there were like 10 or 12 up on eBay straight away. But I don't know how well they sold. But still, it wasn't like there were. It didn't look like there were lots of people on the sales sites. Sorry, Skype's playing around. There we go. It didn't look like there were lots of people on the sales sites who were like, "Oh, I desperately missed out." There was a handful. So again, they probably got their numbers about right. You know, everyone who misses out is going to say no, they didn't make enough, and I completely understand that. And again, you know, I'd be absolutely gutted if I didn't get one.
Yeah, I think you got about right there in terms of them getting the numbers pretty much spot on. Look, these things, there's always someone saying, "Oh, I wish I could have got a ticket. I wish I could have got a book." Whatever. That's the nature of it being limited edition. In general, overall, for a novella, I think it was priced too high personally, but clearly it was fine for the market, and the number, probably spot on.
Yeah, it's. It is what it is. At the end of the day, they've set a price. People have paid it. Whether we like it or not, there's not a lot you can do. I have seen a few people buying it, reading it, selling it on, and some of those people doing it at cost plus postage. So fair play to them.
Yeah.
So the important thing is it's not a mainline story. So as we said, some people won't buy it purely because of that. I have read it. Interesting. It's a very Graham story. It's very it's the story of the Sisypheum. It follows similar lines to other stories. The afterword was quite interesting. I won't spoil anything on it, but there was a point where I was like, "Is this story going to end up going this way?" And it didn't, and I was like, "Thank God for that." And in fact, Graham kind of addresses that in his afterword as well. That the original plan, as is wont to happen with stories, changed quite a lot, and I think it's much better for it. In possibly typical Graham styling, there is some calls forward as well to events that happen much further on in the timeline, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I enjoyed it. There's some really, really nice moments in there. For starters, and I'm sure some lore monkeys will be jumping on some certain parts of it.
Okay, I'm really looking forward to it. I did an interview with Graham about it on Track of Words, and he sold me on the story. I think it sounds great. But with these ones, because there's usually only a 3-month wait. I know 3 months. It's not really only, but it's not like the super big mega editions they do for 40k, where you have to wait 6 months before the hardback comes out. 3 months I can cope with, so that'll be. When did it come? So that'll be sometime in March, there or thereabouts. I'm not too concerned about that. I feel ever so slightly Siege of Terror'd out already.
Sure.
So a bit of a gap I'm personally okay with that.
Yeah, sure, because we've got we've got the next book coming out in February, so at some point. So you'll be straight onto book 4 anyway, I would have thought.
Do you think that's going to come out in February? Because they've not confirmed the date with it.
I thought they said it would be February for the Black Library celebration.
Well, the celebration's definitely happening in February.
Oh, is it not confirmed to be at the celebration?
No. So the Lionel
right.
Johnson Primark novel is.
Yeah, you might
and
be right.
The standard hardback of the First Wall is, but it may be. We don't know. But it hasn't been.
I think it would seem strange not to, when you're having your big celebration, to release one of your biggest books of the year.
I mean, I agree, but
it has been known many times before for them not to do the most obvious thing.
So I was I'm crossing the streams here. Kenny from Combat Phase invited me on the other day, and I don't think that's gone out by the time you and I are recording. But we talked a bit about the Black Library celebration, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, except to say that they've done it 2 years now, and I don't quite think they've figured out what they want it to be, because it hasn't felt like that much of a celebration. You go into the big stores in London, for example, and there's no authors there. There's no big song and dance. It feels like an opportunity to put out some cool new books, great, and some miniatures off the back of Black Library, great. But for people who are fans of the books sort of first, it's maybe a bit of a strange message. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to be compared to an event for those of us in the UK, like the Weekender or Black Library Live. So with the number of books that have already been confirmed at the celebration, these days I would actually be surprised if they did put Saturnine out then, because they want to make it its own thing. And I don't feel like they've really capitalised on what the celebration could be. Then maybe I'm just getting a bit cynical about it, and maybe it will land and everyone will be happy. I don't know.
Yeah, almost what you've said there makes me think, it will definitely be out on the celebration, because it would be the weirdest time to then release it in terms of build-up and stuff. Who knows? I mean, so it was quite interesting because they've made a kind of promise to announce books before they come out now as well. So what was the limited edition? It was the second...
so Incarnation, the second of John French's Heresian Wars.
Yeah, that's the one. And they announced it a week before. And have basically said, this is what we're going to do from now on. Because Sons of the Selenar dropped out of nowhere. Actually put a tweet out. If you're into Black Library books, collecting limited editions, then I still think you need to be on one of the Facebook groups or following certain people on Twitter like yourself. You've just launched a kind of as much information as we can find of what's coming when in a document. The Black Library unofficial group. As soon as information comes out, people put it on there. So usually things like retailer selling lists, things like that. So you get a bit of a jump on things. I think if you're a collector of anything, then you do more than other people to find out, because that's how you keep your collection going. So I do think if you are collecting for the sake of collecting, then no matter what the company do, you try and find out earlier. I do think there's an onus on people to do that. So Sons of the Selenar dropped out of nowhere and people panicked and everything else. But actually, as far as I remember, there was no lead up to the first wall dropping. We knew it was coming, but then we knew Sons of the Selenar was coming. But the actual day, it was just there.
I feel like there'd been more fanfare about the first wall, and in fact, I think that's because the cover of the first wall and for Sons of the Selenar were teased. They were shown in advance, and it was very much it is going to come at some point soon.
And it was for sale in advance as well. So that definitely did help. But the actual date released wasn't the first that I knew about the release date was on Black Library Unofficial. I think, and someone was like, found a retailer's selling thing. It's coming out this weekend.
Yeah, that is usually where I've come across a sort of quote unquote confirmation that these books are coming.
Yeah, so there was some panic about Sons of the Selenar, where actually that that is exactly the same situation as one that came before it. Now they've, let's say, hopefully they're going to give us a week's notice, which is sensible. Some form of notice, any form of notice is better than none, because people work Saturdays. Like, again, if you're a collector, it's a real. I know that I work every other Saturday, and I've been lucky in that we've had no customers in when the one time I did have to buy something, but I've had a word with a friend, and if I'm working a Saturday, they're going to buy it for me, and we'll cancel one of the orders if we both get it. You put those things into place. Immediately, there's people want more, because that's the nature of us as humans, and that's fair enough. But the fact is, now you've got the opportunity to, everyone should be able to have access to buy it. Whether you've got the funds or not, that's a different story, but you've got the access to buy it. You've got the chance that everyone else has got.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, that all the way through, everyone has always been a level playing field.
Yeah.
Because what information is available doesn't just go out in secret to one person. As soon as it's available to anyone, it's available to everyone. I think the justified concern isn't quite the word, dissatisfaction, is that this information could be provided to everyone in advance, and it's chosen not to be, which I understand is frustrating. You're absolutely right that if you're a collector, if you're really serious about getting these, you find a way. You put out feelers, you build those relationships and those networks. You make sure there's someone who can pick it up if you're not available. It is just, and it's entirely doable. It's just a shame that it has to be that way, that the fans have to go out of their way rather than being looked after, where you sort of feel like the people who are prepared to buy your most expensive products are the ones you want to keep on side.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, this is an argument or a conversation that is cyclical and could go on forever. Fundamentally, I agree with you that there are ways and means, but at the same time, I'm just slightly disappointed still that we have to go down the ways and means route.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the change, though, to that week-long notice has come about because people within the company have received feedback that that it's frustrating and everything else. And some of that will be gained by being on Facebook and Twitter and seeing things. But a lot of that, I think, was gained from people saying, "Hey, Black Library, we think this should be done better." We've moved one step. If you want it to move further, then get in touch with Black Library and say, "Cool, thanks for doing that." It's that, to be honest, that was the minimum we expect. That's cool. It's fine. You can say that to them. Please, can we have more notice? Things like the Black Library celebration, we still don't know when it is. It could be 2 weeks away. We don't know. I suspect we'll get a short bit of notice on that at some point. I don't know.
I would say you really hit the nail on the head there with reach out, but do it in that manner. This is great. This is a good step. Thank you. Let's have more, rather than occasionally you see, maybe it's not occasionally, you see the irate rage coming out, and Black Library probably do pay attention to that sort of thing. But if it was me, I would be more inclined to respond to polite, measured feedback than hate-filled fury.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know if these people, a lot of the times they're just venting as well, but it achieves nothing. It's like when, immediately this Saturday we had, there's this many books on eBay. On eBay. People are already scalping. It's like, well, that happens. Why? Like, it happens every time a book's released, limited edition book. Why are we still going on about it? To a point, I understand the frustration of it, but yeah, cool. Yeah, like, we all expect it. We all know it happens, and we, again, just putting it out there, like, you're just regurgitating the same old stuff and achieving nothing by doing it. So why
exactly?
Why wear yourself out doing that? If you take those photos again and send them to Black Library and say, "Look, come on, I know there's only so much you can do, but can we do a bit more? Then at least you're putting the question to someone who's in a position to change it, whether it changes or not. You've done what you can. I don't know. It is what it is, isn't it? But we've got at some point soonish, maybe book 4 coming out within the next 2 months. I would have thought. Certainly, if it's not at the celebration, and you're going to get a week's notice on that. And again,
hopefully,
it looks like now one of the best places to be again is Warhammer Community. This is where you'll get your information first. The amount of times we see, I've said it numerous times now, people who are really into collecting or whatever, who don't follow the company or don't look at the company's official releases and official statements. It's like, well, you can't moan too much if you don't even know that Games Workshop have told you information. Then you've got no place of moaning. It's like, well, actually, yeah, they did tell you. So get on those sites. It doesn't have to be. And again, even if you're on Black Library if unofficial, most people will there's information's come out. So sometimes you don't even have to follow it, but it doesn't take much to follow it. And with the new websites, they've just launched it. You can filter down to Black Library stuff very easily.
Yeah. You can also, if all you're interested in is the week's notice, then you need to turn up at 6 o'clock UK time on a Sunday, because that's when the preview post for the following week is posted every week. So you don't have to look the rest of the week. Or you can turn up on a Wednesday when Black Library posts something. I don't think there's an argument, really. If you're sufficiently interested in it, find a way, and that way is look on the community site. For everything else, forget about limited editions. For just knowing when things are coming with a bit more advance notice, things are available online. You can go onto Track of Words. There's a keeping track of BL stuff post, and hopefully, as you say, the more we all talk about it, the more we let Black Library know, the more they will endeavour to make it better. And certainly the sort of word I'm hearing is that they want to do that. We don't know what's going on inside the business. We don't know if there are constraints, if there are things which are blocking them. Keep talking about it. I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why they didn't do this is pretty much confirmed by someone who used to work there, and it's obvious, and it's been a GW system for a while. Is they know that when they put stuff up on pre-release with no pre-warning, that they get a lot of impulse sales, and it works for them, and it's worked for them with toy soldiers for a long time. The amount of people I know who've now put restrictions on themselves not to buy anything in the first month of release, because if they still want it after that, then they truly wanted it. That kind of thing. It works. So you might think it's underhand or whatever. It's a sales tactic. You don't have to purchase, but they're going to give you that option. And particularly with limited editions, there becomes that panic of, well, I better buy it just in case I want it.
Limited editions are driven by FOMO.
Yeah.
Far more than 50% of that is just that, if I don't buy it now, it's going to sell out, and I'm going to be disappointed. I'm going to wish I'd bought it. Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt. There's no question that it does FOMO drives some sales. I think it's a short-termist view. I don't think it's something which drives sustainability and long-term customer retention. Yeah. It certainly had an impact on me. I'm a pretty loyal customer, and I have really reduced my purchase of hardbacks and certainly of limited editions or special editions. And it's a direct result of not really feeling like I, as a fan, am being catered to. But then maybe I'm in the minority. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and circumstances change for everyone. And there's lots of reasons for it. I think if you're in for collecting limited editions and you're not restrictive on that, then you're setting yourself up for a tough time anyway. We've all got our little thing which we do, which we think sometimes, am I sane doing this? Certainly trying to collect limited editions from Black Library is, it's way beyond my line. I know that much. I've got other stuff to worry about that I don't need to buy, that I am buying. So, hey ho, it's all good.
But the interesting thing is, let's just moving off the grumbling for a second, from a limited editions perspective and on the Heresy and the Siege of Terror, both at the weekend when it was talked about, and there was an article on the community site a few months ago about Sons of the Selnar. It's very clear that this is the first of a series, whatever you want to call it, of Siege of Terror novellas. This isn't a standalone, this isn't just a one-off, and it's definitely going to be more. But we've not heard any word of who's writing them and what they may be.
No.
So, on a positive note, I think overall, novellas in the Siege of Terror, if BL weren't doing limited editions, we'd probably all be going, this is great, this is more content. Like, I'm happy to read this. I can choose what format I want to buy it, all that stuff. So, more novellas, yeah, that's a good thing. Even though I'm a bit heresied out, in the long term, whether I choose to read them as soon as they're released or later on, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, it is cool. And they'd soon be complaining the other way if we got to the end of the Siege of Terror and people said, but what about this person? And there is definitely going to be that anyway. But there are certain little groups, certain stories that probably can be told that don't need to be in that main story that deserve some form of Siege of Terror-esque ending. So,
can you think of anything off the top of your head? Because I was trying to work out what else might be a novella. I'm not really sure where the obvious candidates are.
Well, I suppose actually maybe not. I was thinking of the Sigillites' little crew. Like their story doesn't necessarily have to have ended where it did, although it's a decent ending.
Yeah.
There are events that could be shown because there's still part of a story to be told. In that respect, maybe they keep it secret, maybe they don't.
Do you mean the Knights Errant specifically, or Garrow and co, who are sort of still around?
Both potentially. It depends how. So we've got 5 books to finish off the siege.
Yep.
Not everyone on Terra can have their story told in those 5 books. So I don't know which characters aren't going to be told in those aspects, but there's room to tell stories on Terra. Things like maybe the Emperor's Children when they go off and do their own thing, and the Night Lords. There's space there that is not to do with the siege anymore. They're off doing different things. So there's potential for them and maybe adversaries as well to be a part of that. The group that went off that accepted their new names. There's a little bit of there's stuff that happens pre the Emperor falling that could be a short story potentially. It might not be. And then I don't know beyond that exactly who. I'm trying to think now. You might be right, but all I know is we're not going to get satisfactory endings for all the people we would want.
No way. So, I think what's going to be really interesting is, bearing in mind these are Siege of Terror novellas, I think there are a lot of characters from earlier in the series who weren't killed off or didn't have, resolutions that you could go back and tell stories about that aren't taking place on or around Terra.
Yeah.
But do they feel like appropriate stories for Siege of Terror novellas? I don't know. So I think it's going to be interesting to see whether the novellas are, like Sons of the Selnar, set nearby, like geographically nearby,
Yep.
or whether they're just going to be other stories happening elsewhere out in the Imperium. And I mean, who knows? I have no idea.
Yeah, you still got, even while the siege is going on, you've still got Mars that can have stories told. You've still got fleets in orbit. The crew, the Sisypheum, are an example of a force that aren't on Terra, but are doing some stuff. There's room for maybe not a huge number of stories, but room for a few stories in and around there. I think it might be a case of so we know. Well, we expect that. It's written about that Khan's the first one through the wall, wasn't it? So we'll probably get that shown in a book. But how many of those characters who are below Khan's stature can we realistically get? This is what happened to them.
Yeah, beyond maybe just a throwaway reference.
So I'm sure they'll come up with with various things. Like, my mind's gone a bit blank. As soon as you ask me, my mind's gone a bit blank.
Yeah, of course.
On a few different things. But there must be a number. There are so many. If you looked through the books, actually stopped to look at the different characters available. I mean, maybe we get one like, when do we know Alanis? Is he going to Pius? Is he going to appear? Are we going to have a novella? Is his appearance going to be explained in the novel just at that point, and we're going to get a novella that explains the bit up to that, which doesn't actually need to be told but could be told. Something like that could work well. Grammaticus, what's he up to? Is it the same kind of thing? There's potential for a few different things like that, and there are, as we said, the Emperor's Children and the Night Lords do their own thing. We've got last time we saw Lorgar,
exactly.
pre Heresy, he was told something that I'm not sure is the end of his story. So just as you start to think about it, there's potential for little bits in there that might, as I say, not directly relate, or might not need to be told in the mainline story, but still feed into it. So I'm excited, and I'm sure Black Library authors are paid to come up with these things, so they could probably think of a million more than me. So,
well, I suspect during the siege meetings they were going, "I'd love to do that. It's not in scope. Let's park that and maybe come back to it another time."
I wouldn't be surprised as well if, as John wrote his and as Guy wrote his, and as Dan's writing his, he's gone, "I've had to take out these chunks and I've half written them." That's half a story there. But it's not important enough and it's not big enough to go in this book. So, who knows? See what comes.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's, from a pure heresy perspective, the next thing, of course, is not Siege of Terror. The next thing that we'll get is that Lionel Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Primarch's novel in February, the limited edition.
Yeah. Well, I have no idea what to expect from that either. So, just looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the cover's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Groovy. I guess we'll have something to talk about, whenever I get hold of it, but sometime after February.
Yeah, well, we should have you back on soon anyway to review whatever Primarch's books we're up to. I think the latest ones that you had read that we hadn't talked about.
Yeah, I think I've still got a gap. I've missed one months ago, so
sure.
Eventually I'll get round to it. But happy to come back on. I'm sure we'll find something to talk about.
Wonderful, sir. Well, until then, cheers for coming on.
Thanks very much.
And thank you for listening to another episode of The Imperial Truth. If you want, we have all the usual social media presence. We have search for The Imperial Truth on Facebook. We have a group and a page. So feel free to jump on those. Imperial_Truth on Twitter, at Child of Fang on Instagram. My own personal feed is at Child of Fang on Twitter as well. If you've got some feedback, you can use any of those channels. You can also email Greg at theimperialtruth.com. You can send me a message on Facebook as well if you want through the show page. We are looking for stuff we can do moving forwards, improving the show. I'm thinking we might do a bit of a question and answer every episode if we're going to do a month one. So that might be something I want to bring in if we can get enough decent questions coming in. So if you do have any questions you want answered on the show, something like that, then please send them in and we'll do a little bit on the show to make sure they're done. So whether that's questions about the law or how to do painting questions, I'll make sure I get relevant people on to answer them. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you high-end painting advice. That would be terrible for everyone involved. But yeah, anything like that, gaming advice, lists, something like that. Feel free to send those questions in, and we can use those for the show. And one thing I will say is, if you've got a question, someone else has probably got a similar question somewhere else. So sometimes you can be like, I don't want to bother them. But actually, sometimes your question provides me with then giving an answer, or whoever's relevant to give an answer, and then someone else listening goes, oh, I never thought of that. They can be really good like that as well. So feel free to get in touch for anything like that. If you want to go a little bit further in supporting the show, we do have a Patreon. You can find us in the show notes. There's a link, or give us a search on Patreon, and that works like a tip jar. And every month you will pledge, $1 up to whatever you want, and that helps keep all the lights running and stuff like that on the show, and buy the equipment and what have you. And a massive thank you to all the patrons ever for doing that as well. You've all been wonderful. But I think that's done. Everybody be cool to each other when you're talking about Heresy. So we talk with Darren. Try and make it as inclusive as possible. Even if they don't play the Heresy the way you play, maybe they play it the way someone else plays. And we'll all benefit by having more people into the game. This is, as we said, this is what Warhammer community can really help us do. But we need to be the foot soldiers in that as well. Otherwise, people will be interested and then leave anyway. So be cool with that. And until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.